This is more of a vent post than a story. I have an unusual condition where I randomly age to any number. Some days I might be an old man, and other days I might be a baby. My parents did their best to give me the best life they could offer. I couldn't go to school all of the time because I would wake up completely old at the height of 6'2", while the night before I was just a crying baby. There are times I would wake up at the right healthy ages, from 15 to 45, and that's just my opinion. My dad would promise me to take me somewhere fun as I was a child. Then the next day I would age up to an old man again, and all I wanted to do was watch the news. I wish I could just age in order like everyone else. I don't care if it was young to old or old to young, because random aging is just terrible. At the moment you could be at the prime age of being in your 20s, while the next day you could end up as a crying baby again. People found me as a crying baby on the street, and also as an old homeless man on the bench who was nearing to death. I just want to be normal. Many different types of people like me at different ages. Mothers or women who want to become pregnant like me as a baby, while old folk like me when I am old, and the present generation like me in the prime ages of being in my 20s, 30s and 40s. I was once kidnapped as a baby, and then the kidnapper let me go a day later, as I ended up aging to a man in my 30s. A day later I found myself in an old people's home, as I had randomly aged to an old man in my 90s. Then a day later I walked out of the old people's home as a rebellious teenager. I just want to age normally, in order where I could plan things. It's impossible to plan anything in my condition, as in one moment I could be an old man, and the next day I could go back to being a baby. There is nothing out there. If this is depressing, then I am sorry. David was a host of a mystery dinner night. There were lots of nods to Hitchcock movies scattered around the house, and there would be a murder, not real of course, happen, and the guests were to find out which person in the house was the killer. There were 4 guests, 2 men and 2 women. The man that was putting on the event said to the guests, "Hello, my name is David, and I have rented out this luxurious old house to hold what was to be a very exciting and thrilling night. There will be tributes throughout the house that pay tribute to different movies from Hitchcock, and you will be able to maybe put 2 and 2 together with different clues left around the house as to who the murderer is. We will be starting the night with a brief introduction by the man himself, who is played by the winner to play the role of Alfred Hitchcock, who is Eugene, who I must say strikes an uncanny resemblance to Alfred Hitchcock himself. I had auditions from lots and lots of different people, but I'm sure Eugene will play the role of Mr. Hitchcock perfectly himself. I must let you know that Eugene, or should I say Alfred, knows who the killer is, so maybe he can try to play friends with him to try to get information out of him. He isn't going to spill the beans, of course, but you never know. If you're that clever, you might be able to get information out of him that he doesn't even realize he is giving. From here, friends, I introduce you to Mr. Alfred Hitchcock. Eugene stood in front of the 2 men and 2 women. They were very surprised by how Eugene had looked like Alfred Hitchcock. He spoke. "Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this amazing Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Murder Night. We will start the night with a very tasty meal, and things will get very exciting very soon. You will be able to find clues and different items around the house that will have a link to different movies from me, and they might be a link to the murder, or maybe not. It is for you to decide. Enjoy the evening, everyone. Both couples sat down and enjoyed their meal. It took them about an hour to have the starter and main course and dessert gone. Right then, Alfred came out again and said, "Okay, everyone, explore the house, find the body, and solve the murder. And as ye know, before even coming here, the winner will win £10,000. And I know ye are two couples, so ye can have that money if ye so choose with your partner. Good luck, everyone." Both couples walked around the house. One couple was Matt and Susie. They entered a room with a curtain and a rope hanging on the wall, and both realized it was a reference to Hitchcock movies, The Rope and Torn Curtain. But there was no body, so they didn't see any other relevance to it. The other couple were Sharon and Michael. They entered a room where there was a wheelchair and a camera by the window. Instantly, they knew it was a reference to Rear Window. They were expecting to see a shower with blood on it as a reference to Psycho somewhere in the house, but Mr. Hitchcock's most known movie, Psycho, was nowhere to be found. There was a person walked into the room, and the couple jumped. It was a man who said, "Hello, sir and madame. I am the butler in this house. If you would like me to assist ye in any way, please just ring the bell that is placed in the hall by the telephone." A woman had entered the room, and when she saw them, walked back out. A few minutes later, they heard a scream from the window and ran over to look. To their surprise, they had seen the woman who had just been in the room earlier had ran away from a body. The shock came to them when they had told Alfred, and he had looked with shock, knowing that wasn't the fake murder planned for their mystery murder night. When they went down to investigate, they both realized that the dead body was actually real. The body was of the butler. A couple of minutes later, Eugene rang David, and David rushed outside. He looked shocked. Michael told him that it was a woman who had murdered the man. They saw her running away. David froze and said, "I know who the killer was." They all looked shocked and asked who. He took out a knife and stabbed the couple, and turned to Eugene. "Mr. Hitchcock, do you think I would forget a reference to your movie Psycho? Let me introduce you to my character. My name is Norman Bates. Now you can leave, as I don't want to hurt you, but just to let you know how well I planned the twist. The killer was Mother." Eugene ran and ran, knowing that the host of the party was a real killer, believing he was Norman Bates, and also was dressed up as his mother, who was the woman who killed the butler and couple. A few minutes later, after Eugene rang the police, they arrived to see the other couple dead in a room full of birds, eating them.
Hi, this is Kate Valentine. I'm responding about the request you put on the police auction materials. I bought a few kids' books from that auction, actually a whole crate of them. At the time, I didn't look at them, I just put them on the bargain shelf in order of the authors' names. I had never heard of the author or the book title, so I gave them all orange stickers, which meant 50 cents each. One day, it was particularly dead, so I paged through them, and I noticed this one with very simple, minimalistic drawings called Dave's Days. There was no cohesive story. Unlike other children's books that use each page as a part of a lesson, here there was none of that. One page was the Dave character sitting at a kitchen table with a mug in front of him. He was the kind of stick figure you see on bathroom doors. Dave's kitchen was written in block letters above him. The whole book was like that. Just Dave, sitting alone in one setting or another. The park, the library. I put the book away and looked through the others and found another one in the Dave series. This one was called Dave and His Friends. The cover was Dave outside his house, like the first, but next to him stood a little girl with a blonde ponytail. 2 boys and a girl, all brown-haired with freckles, looked out from the window inside the house. This book was all about Dave and these kids doing things together and going places like to the park and getting ice cream. Every time Dave did something nice for them, they'd say, "Dave is my friend." But since no one has a mouth and therefore no one is smiling, it only makes the whole thing odd, like when you read a happy text message without an exclamation mark. I put the book away. Later that night, I decided to Google the titles of the books. When I got nothing, I just Googled the things in the book, and eventually I Googled the phrase, "Dave is my friend." An article came up. It was about a girl named Jennifer Holland who had gone missing sometime earlier and about how her parents hadn't given up hope. It also alluded to police being suspicious of them as the circumstances of her disappearance were strange. They said they woke up to find their front door open and Jennifer gone. 2 things really struck me from the article. The first was that the last name Holland seemed significant. I couldn't remember why until I went back to the Dave books and saw that Dave lived in Hollandtown. The second thing, I'll get to that in a sec. After hours of searching for more information, I stumbled across a forum. I don't remember where, maybe on Reddit, but one subject said, "Has anyone read Dave and the Others?" It was a guy with the handle Oregon Ollie who had found an eerily similar book. The post was 2 years old. Later, I searched for Oregon Ollie, but his account was inactive. When he Googled the book, he didn't find anything either. But, like me, he started Googling everything in the book and found a news story, just like I had. 3 siblings had been found dead at Chipewyan Lake in Canada. They lay on the shore, holding hands. Their last name was Robin. They died from exposure. Mr. and Mrs. Robin woke up in the middle of the night by a cold wind the night their kids went missing. The door had been left wide open. It was January. The police found a note at the Robin home left by the kids, but the article said the investigators would not release the contents to the public. Oregon Ollie said that in his book, there were 3 red robins that would fly over Dave's head when he got sad. The book was mostly a man walking the city sidewalks at night or sitting at a park bench alone with the stars over him. Whenever Dave seemed sad, the robins would come and fly over his head, and he would just look up and watch. The second thing that I mentioned earlier that struck me in the first article I read was that Jennifer Holland had drawn a picture before she went missing. It was of a stick figure man and herself. Her parents didn't know what it was. She had written, "Dave is my friend," on it. I don't have the books anymore. I went back through them after reading Oregon Ollie's account, and seeing those 3 kids in the window of Dave's house freaked me out, so I threw them away. I still think about it, though. Sometimes I wish I kept them, but the thought of having them near me gives me the chills. I wasn't going to mention this, but after I read the Reddit account, I wrote my own post about it. No one ever picked up on it, but right after that, I started getting phone calls. When I answered, I would hear some electrical buzzing, but that was it. First, the calls were just at my house, but then I got them on my cell and even at work. Slowly, it died down, but I still get them from time to time. The last thought that crosses my mind when I lock my doors at night is, I wonder if it's Dave calling me. And I wonder if he's there somewhere, watching my house when I go to bed. Sometimes I move my bureau in front of the door just to be safe.
Yeah!
In my area, nobody is allowed to cry, and it's a hard thing to keep up to not ever cry while living in an area full of horrid and cold people. My parents are always shouting at us to never cry, and every house has a swimming pool, and we all live next to rivers and canals. When my eldest brother started crying, my parents took his eyes out so that he could never ever cry again. And when my second eldest brother started to cry, my parents took his eyes out as well, and also the rest of his face. If we were on the verge of crying, we then needed to jump into the swimming pool or to the next nearest river or canal. It's a horrible moment when you find yourself on the verge of tears because someone has done something to you or a tragic event has happened, which just makes you emotional. When I am on the verge of tears, I just jump into a swimming pool, or I go and find the next nearest river or canal. I have nearly drowned many times, but at least I have never cried. This is why everyone in my area has a swimming pool and lives next to rivers or canals. You cannot cry underwater. I once helped a friend to never cry by pushing him into the canal, where he unfortunately drowned. His parents understood why I did this to their son, as he was on the verge of crying, and when I kept asking him whether he was okay, it just pushed him nearer to crying. Then one day, I found a cabin in some abandoned forest, and inside this cabin, silence and privacy was present. I was able to cry without anyone knowing or seeing me. I passed this secret on to 4 of my friends, and we each took turns going into this cabin to cry on our own. It was amazing. We had a timetable of whose turn it was to cry inside the cabin, but one day a terrible event had come upon us when the town economy had completely gone. This destroyed the order of the timetable because all 5 of us desperately needed to go inside the cabin so that we could cry about it on our own. None of us dared to go inside the cabin together and to see each other cry, because that would be an abomination to see each other cry. So I took my gun out and shot my 4 friends, and I went inside the cabin where I cried on my own about the terrible event of the economy and my 4 dead friends. So everything with the cabin worked out in the end. Hello, let me tell you about a story about a detective called Mason. He had a brilliant idea for investigating crime scenes. The idea wasn't his, of course. It had been used for years and years and could have been forgotten about, but different investigators still use it when investigating crime scenes. The idea is creating a miniature model of the whole crime scene. For instance, if it was a farmhouse with 2 people and one stabbed with a knife, then create a model of that entire scene. Mason used to find it very helpful to be able to look at the model of the crime scene and go through it in his mind what could have happened. This method helped Mason solve lots of different crimes. Mason's wife Susan was a teacher in the local school and used to often worry about Mason out and about in his job, but she used to like when he was in the basement with his crime scene miniatures because she knew he was safe at home and wasn't in the way of any criminal that could harm him or worse, kill him. One day there was a murder in the school and Mason had to do a miniature of the hallway by the lockers where the murder took place. He knew that there was just lockers, a school bag and a boy that seemed to have been hit by a hammer. Mason was working hard trying to figure out what he could see in it. Sometimes he wondered, was it harder there being a lot to the scene or less? But he knew one thing, that no matter how much there was in the scene or how little, it seemed to help him having a miniature model. That night Mason seemed to have had a nightmare and woke up feeling agitated after it. He got up to get a glass of water. On his way, by accident, he knocked against his wife's handbag and it fell to the floor, with some of its contents spilt out on the floor. He froze in fear when he saw what he saw staring up at him from the floor. It was a hammer with what looked like blood on the top. He looked back at the bed, hoping Susan wouldn't wake up. He put it together. Susan had been talking about a boy who was constantly bullying her behind people's backs, and she was afraid to tell anyone because she felt they would think she had no control over her students. Mason knew the student was hit with a blunt object, which was very highly likely to be the hammer. Mason felt movement from the bed and quickly put the hammer back into Susan's bag. He went down to the kitchen and drank some water and then walked back to the basement and looked at the miniature model. He imagined Susan striking the student on the head with a hammer and knew that he heard the CCTV footage was missing, and that would be explained by Susan being able to have access to it to delete it. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. Suddenly he heard movement behind him and looked around. His wife Susan was standing next to him with a miniature model of himself lying in a pool of blood. She put the miniature model of him down on the ground and said, "Well, Mason, I was really hoping it wouldn't come to this, where I have to finish this miniature crime scene, but it looks like I'll have to make the background or basement." She pulled out a gun and shot Mason in his head. 6 months later, Susan was speaking at the book launch of her bestseller called My Husband is Gone, But I Continued His Passion. She spoke into the mic with emotion. "I am here today talking about my book, which is a way of me coping with the murder of my hard-working husband, who was passionate about figuring out ways of solving crimes by using miniature crime scene models. The title is long, but I couldn't think of any other appropriate title to use other than My Husband is Gone, But I Continued His Passion. My husband was such a loving man, and the only time I was truly content with him working on his investigations was when he was in the basement working on his miniature crime scene models. After my husband died, I tried to harness my emotions into making a miniature crime scene of him in honor of him. I would love if my husband was still alive and I didn't have to write this book, but I want to speak out to the many wives of men like my husband. Don't take a day for granted, because if your husband is working in a dangerous line of work like mine was, then his life could be snuffed out at any minute. The crowd were lapping up Susan's speech, and Susan was enjoying knowing she would get lots of royalties from her books and TV appearances, etc., and her bully was out of the way. She paused for a moment, thinking to herself, I didn't want to appear a pushover teacher by saying I couldn't control my student, and I didn't want to harm my loving husband, but I had to. I wasn't a murderer, so it's better I got a book deal and wasn't cut out as the murderer. They would think I was some sort of psycho. She saw a fly land in her hand and thought to herself, after all, I wouldn't hurt a fly. Hello, my name is William. For as long back as I can remember, I have this strange feeling that someone is stalking me. But the last few months the feeling had gotten much stronger. Strong enough that wherever I go, whatever I am doing, I can expect to see a shadow. It's like a silhouette. I can't make out no features. It is ruining everything I love to do. I love cycling for miles and miles, but even if I'm cycling on a bike, I can feel the shadow behind me, and even a lot of times, see it. I felt like I was going crazy. One night I was kissing my girlfriend, and that damn shadow showed up, and I got a start and jumped, frightening my girlfriend. She must have thought I was so weird, and I couldn't explain it to her. How is she going to feel about me? I say, oh, by the way, a lot of the time I see a shadow chasing me. That is a sure and fast-track way of making her my ex. One day I couldn't take it anymore, so I went to see a doctor who was able to help me find out what the hell was going on with me. The doctor said, "Hello, William. My name is Dr. Frederick Stone. I am going to try to help you get to the bottom of what is bothering you by using a method called regression hypnosis. Some doctors claim to go back so far in a person's life that they may even uncover things about any past lives they might have had. But I'm sure we won't have to go back that long. You see, William, what I feel like is happening you from what you told me over the phone is you are suppressing memories that cause you pain, but sometimes those memories are coming to the surface in the shape of a shadow that you imagine. It is your subconscious telling you there is a problem that you're trying to forget. After a few minutes I was in hypnotic state, and I could see myself back in my house in a dark room with my twin brother. We were only kids and we were playing murder in the dark. It was a game that you had to search around the dark and touch someone to kill them. That's only in the game, of course. That's how I can remember playing it anyway. I pushed my twin brother too much and didn't realize there was something in front of him to trip him, and he fell down on the ground and banged his head. I could just hear the bang, but didn't realize what had happened until I put the light on and saw my twin brother lying in a pool of blood. And he was really dead. It all came flooding back to me now, and I woke up in the doctor's office with my blood thumping in my ears. I now know that it was not my imagination when I saw my doctor give a strange look behind me, and I turned around and saw the silhouette behind me, and knew my doctor saw it too. The difference is now I know that silhouette is the ghost of my dead twin brother. Jack and Linda were devastated one night in 2015 when their beloved dog Huck had gone missing one day during the summer. They both hoped for a week on end that the dog would turn up, and even though it was chipped, they didn't seem to be able to track it. Jack put it down to criminals stealing the dog and removing the chip. Linda didn't want to buy another pet, as she said it would just cause too much emotion with her and her loving memories of Huck. In 2020, Linda was sitting out in the garden, enjoying the sunshine, when she heard something move in the garden. She was surprised, so turned around. To her surprise, she saw a dog with an uncanny resemblance to Huck. It had been 5 years, and she wondered, how could the dog have came back after all this time? She couldn't help herself, so she called the dog in a friendly tone. "Here, Huck." Suddenly the dog barked very aggressively. Linda was surprised. She thought of something, but wouldn't find the bravery to check with the dog being so aggressive. But still she saw it. The brown patch under Huck's neck proved to Linda it was really Huck. She was so happy that he had returned, but wondered what made him so angry. She couldn't believe her eyes. After 5 years, Huck had finally came home. She was going to call her husband, but had decided to surprise him when he came home. That evening, when Jack had come home and saw what Linda's surprise was, he seemed to have gone pale. Linda wondered what was wrong, as she was certain Jack would be delighted to see Huck return. Suddenly Huck jumped right up and mauled Jack until his body was lying on the ground lifeless. That night she had a call from her friend Mike. She listened in shock to what Mike had to say. "Linda, I can't understand what is happening, and I'm sure there is an explanation, but I was the only one Jack had told. 5 years ago, Jack accidentally ran over Huck in the driveway and killed him. I helped him bury Huck. Linda, I don't know how this is possible, but before I called you, I went to where we buried him. The dog's bones and everything are gone. There is nothing there." Linda heard a noise behind her, and Huck was standing right next to her and started barking, then jumped right for her. The relationship between me and my wife had turned strange a couple of weeks ago, and I am not sure what happened exactly. A month and a half ago, my wife came screaming into the living room, shoving a picture into my face. She kept on shouting, "Who is this younger woman you were with?" And I calmly told her that the younger woman was her. She then looked at the picture and realized that it was her when she was in her early 20s. We were both in our 40s now, and she cried and apologized, and we made up. Then, a couple of days later, she barged into our bedroom and was shouting at me to explain the photo of me with a younger woman. I tried explaining to her that the younger woman in the photo was her when she was younger. She had a knife in her hand, but I kept control of that hand that she had gripped a knife with. She then realised that the young woman in the photo was actually her. Something wasn't right, and I decided to go through some old photos together of both of us in our younger days. As we were going through the old photo book, my wife would scream and shout at me in a murderous tone every time she saw me in a photo with her when we were younger. Then she would apologise when she realised it was herself in the photo, and it was incredibly unusual. Then I started doing it myself. As we were looking through the old photo book, I would go angry and accuse my wife of cheating when I would see a photo of her with a younger man, but the younger man is me. I would then apologise straight away. Going through that old photo book had constantly made me and my wife shout at each other and accuse one another of cheating until we both realise it is just our younger selves. We have burnt all photos. Barry woke up in a room with no memory of how he got there. His joints ached and he felt strange. He saw a camera up in the wall, staring right at him. Then suddenly, two men walked into the room. One man said, "Hello, Barry. Relax. You will be given a full explanation why you're here in just a short time, but there are a few things you need to sort out yourself first. You need to just relax and try your best to remember anything you can that has happened to you before you woke up today. It doesn't have to be recent. Anything at all." Barry felt the question bizarre and was about to say something when he felt kind of dizzy, and suddenly he blanked out. As he did, he had a memory of a person speaking, but he could not make out who it was. He tried his best to look at the face, hoping he could make out the features, but it was no good. The face was just a blur. When he snapped out of his daze, the man spoke to him again. "Did you remember anything, Barry? It is very, very important that you remember anything at all before we fill you in." Barry said, "What am I doing in this room? Who are ye? What do ye want with me?" The man spoke again. "Barry, we will give you all the answers to that in a very short time, but for now, we really need you to remember anything at all, because it is vital you do before we give you the information you were requesting." Barry could feel himself get dizzy again, and once again he could see the face, but it was just a blur still. He wondered who the person was, knowing that's probably what the weird man is asking him. Who is that person that is so blurry to him? It was driving him crazy. When he snapped out of his daydream again, the man asked, "Do you remember anything, Barry? What is it you see when you black out?" Barry said, "I see a face, but it's a blur. I can't make out who it is." The other man spoke this time. "You're doing great, Barry, but before we tell you what is happening, you need to see that face. You're not ready to hear the truth until you do." Suddenly Barry blacked out again, and he could see a person walking towards him, but the person was still a blur, until suddenly the blur became clear, and he was looking at the face, and realized he was looking at himself. He said to the men, "It's me. That person who was a blur is me." The man said, "That's good, Barry. You're in a good state when you realize that is you. Barry, You paid a large amount of money in the year 2020 to a secret government organisation to do to you what is happening right now. And I have all the paperwork to show you that you've given your full consent. You will get a shock when I'm about to tell you what I'm about to tell you, but believe me, we are only doing what you paid for. The year is 2220. You were 200 years into the future from when you were frozen, and the information was passed down generations to you beyond frozen in the year 2220. Barry, you nearly didn't make it, but the problem is, Barry, no one else has except us and maybe 100 more. The world experienced an apocalypse after World War III happened just a few months after you were frozen in the year 2020. We had this bunker specially built, and the elite in the government survived also. The world is no longer like it was, Barry. We had to start again. I am sorry you woke up to a world like this. They didn't get frozen, Barry. You are the only one who did get frozen. That's the one thing I was trying to figure out. But the other survivors, well, they were the elite. The big, huge government officials, the president, and everyone else. They had their doomsday bunkers. They were the lucky ones. But even with that, there are now only about just over 100 of us left. This world is in ruins. This world is no way anywhere near the world I read about in history like it was before World War III started. 10 minutes later, Barry exited the bunker to see what the world looked like, and what he saw was a city in wreck and ruin. Suddenly he had another blackout. He could see himself talking to an elderly man. The man spoke. "I will do this for you, Barry, as I don't have much time to live with my crippling disease. Once you're in the bunker and safe and frozen, I will detonate the biggest nuclear missile this world has ever seen." Barry suddenly snapped out of his flashback. The man was standing next to him. This city you were looking at was built about 195 years ago. There were about 10,000 survivors in the bunkers then, just after World War III ended. But unfortunately, not many are left, and unfortunately, people aren't in a rush to bring new life into this world. Would you blame them? By the way, Barry, what made you decide you wanted to get frozen until the year 2220? Barry couldn't tell the real answer, so just said, "I can't remember." Hello, my name is Darren. I have loads of people telling me that I am crazy because I tell them that I can make people do things and hypnotize them, etc. I wouldn't stoop to the level of recording myself, making them act silly without their knowledge, etc. Because if they don't believe me in my gifts, that's their problem, not mine. I'm not going to record them so they can look back at them acting stupid and having no recollection of it. No, if they don't believe me, that is their problem. My girlfriend was arguing with me for weeks about going to see a psychologist. I wouldn't even film myself using my gifts on her, as the same applies for her. If she doesn't believe me, then that's her problem, not mine. But I gave in to her arguing and eventually went to see a psychologist. My girlfriend drove me to the psychologist, and there wasn't a word spoken on the way there in the car. I was angry that my own girlfriend didn't believe in my powers. When I was sitting down in the psychologist's room, I felt betrayed that I had to sit here in front of someone who didn't even know me and, like everyone else, probably thinks I'm crazy. The psychologist was an annoying-looking man who said to me, "Hello, Darren. My name is Frederick Ryan. I am sure you will feel a lot better after our session. But first, please tell me why you are here today." I said, "I am here because everyone doesn't believe me that I have powers to make people do things against the will without them even realizing it. They have no recollection whatsoever of doing it. I am not filming anyone or anything to prove I have the gift." The psychologist said, "Well, Darren, I am sure you must realize why people are so reluctant in believing you. I mean, especially when they have no recollection of doing so. But Darren, I'm sure there is a good reason why you feel like you are actually doing these things. But in reality, they're just in your imagination. And when you come to the realization that you're just imagining these powers, then things will start coming together a lot easier in the puzzle." The session lasted about 30 minutes. When I was out of the building, I checked my phone to see the live stream I had of me making him dance around his office like an idiot without even realizing it. I laughed. I knew it was just me that filmed him, and just me that will be able to watch this video. I got a thrill when I saw myself confess to making a person who annoyed me stab themselves with my powers. But then I switched back to the live feed and forwarded it up to real time, right now. I didn't realize that he had actually been recording me also. Maybe he records all his subjects, but I could hear our conversation come out of his laptop speakers. I could see his face go weird when I was confessing about the murder. He then was getting his phone ready to make a call, more than likely the police. I used my powers to him bang the phone off his head over and over and over until it was a bloody mess, and he fell down on the floor, dead.
Someone found it by accident. God knows what they were looking for in the first place. The website address is a series of random letters and numbers, and of course, like all secret dark web addresses, it ended with a .onion. You need special software to find it. It's called Tor. There is no Google in the deep web, no browsing. You have to know what you went there for. But some people think of themselves as explorers, and try to find web addresses simply by typing random combinations of letters and numbers. Supposedly, that's how they found Jane Woodbridge 813. That's how the story goes anyways, but I don't believe it. But then, I don't know how anyone else would have found it. The site itself is just a black screen with a video player at the center. The title of the video is written at the top of the screen. Nothing else is written anywhere. The video has no audio. I first saw it when I was 13, back in 2006. It stayed with me. It wasn't graphic, but still, I never forgot it. Which is why what's happening now has been keeping me up every night. It's like this nagging thing I've had in the back of my mind since I was a kid, and now it's at the forefront of my brain. It's all I think about. When I was 13, my best friend's older brother lived in their basement. Every now and then we would go down and try to get a turn at whatever PC game he was into at the time. One day we went down to find him reading a forum. We asked what game it was for, but he said it wasn't a game. It was for a video that had been going around. He hadn't seen it yet, but he heard rumors. He followed the instructions on the forum and found the site. It was locked with a username and password prompt. He read something he had handwritten on a piece of paper and typed it in. The prompt disappeared, and then there it was. Empty, save for the video player. He said I have to close the door before he could show it to us. I did. He pressed play. The video was shot from inside a house looking out through the old window to the backyard. In the middle of the yard was a girl. She was a teenager, but I couldn't tell exactly how old, maybe 16 or 17. She was leashed. It was wrapped around her neck, a chain running down to a pole on the ground so she couldn't move very far. At the moment the video started, she was standing awkwardly and looking at the cameraman, as if waiting for something. Beer cans were strewn all across the yard, and as I mentioned before, no audio. The camera jolted right. At the same time, the girl looked in the same direction. The camera couldn't see anything past a few feet ahead of the girl since it was being recorded indoors. But the girl could see it. Whatever it was that made them both look, it was ahead of her. She began to cry. She pulled at the chain and the pole, but they wouldn't move. She turned to the camera person, her cheeks red and wet with tears. She begged. The cameraman's hand popped up in front of the lens. He pointed an index finger straight down. The girl seemed to understand the gesture. She still cried, but now she closed her eyes, and one leg at a time got down on her knees. Then she bowed, her entire body bending until her face was down on the grass. Her hands stretched out in front of her. She turned them palm up and raised them as if she was worshipping. The video ends there. My friend said it was lame and called me out to play. His brother was interested. He remained for days trying to find answers, but there were none. I wasn't sure what to think. And then, as time wore on, there would be nights just before I fell asleep that I would see her there, kneeling on the grass. I needed to know what was standing in front of her at that moment. More than anything, I needed to know what she saw. Once, a year or two later, when we were sitting at the back porch, my friend's brother joined us as he smoked a cigarette. I asked if he ever found out who the girl was or anything else about that video. He said no one knew the girl. He was talking about the entire online community. They had looked for every girl with that name they could find. Nothing ever came of it. But he did say one thing which was very strange. He said the brand of the beers that were all over the yard didn't exist. Not in America or any country. This was such a strange additive that, again, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then when I was 16, in the winter of 2009, a small news story went viral. The story was of a girl who had gone missing after going out for a walk with her friends. Two of her friends said she had been acting strange days before her disappearance, as if she was afraid or something. They had been walking home from school one day, and she just ran without warning. They couldn't catch up, and no one could find her after that. Her own parents confirmed that the two girls had told them of their daughter's behavior, telling the police she had recently developed a fear of mirrors. Her name was Jane Woodbridge. She was 17. Reddit and 4chan exploded with the news of it. Jane's photo was quickly released to the public, and yes, it was her, the girl from the video. But no one could believe it was true. The video had been released years prior to her kidnapping. The mystery only grew when photos of Jane as a 14-year-old girl were used for the 60 Minutes interview with her parents. They showed a much younger, much shorter, acne-ridden girl with chubby cheeks and big glasses. She did not at all resemble the Jane in the video. Some months later, Jane's body was found in the woods, where she had run from her friends and gone missing. The spot had been searched thoroughly by police and volunteers. The police and family did not disclose a cause of death, but they did say it did not look like a homicide. Between the day the video appeared online and the day she went missing, it had been 813 days exactly. After Jane's body was found, the Deep website, which had been locked again with a new username and password for 6 months or so after Jane went missing, was finally cracked. Some months later, Jane's body was found in the woods, where she had run from her friends and gone missing. The spot had been searched thoroughly by police and volunteers. The police and family did not disclose a cause of death, but they did say it did not look like a homicide. Between the day the video appeared online and the day she went missing, it had been 813 days exactly. After Jane's body was found, the Deep website, which had been locked again with a new username and password for 6 months or so after Jane went missing, was finally cracked. The video had changed. The inscription read Emily Forster, 12. The video began by showing Emily walking with her friends along her street. It is handheld, the camera person hidden and far from the kids. Emily's arms are crossed in front of her and her head is down. She suddenly runs, crossing into the woods. Her friends give chase. The camera person moves forward toward the woods. The video cuts to minutes later. The camera person hides as Emily's friends exit the woods, unable to find her. 4chan, Reddit, and other social media sites began the search for Emily Forster. For the first day of the search, the name was even trending on Twitter. 12 days after the video was posted, 16-year-old Emily Forster was reported missing after she did not come home from her job in Creede, Colorado. This was nowhere near where Jane lived. Her friends told police she ran while coming home. She had been quiet all day, scared of something, but she wouldn't say what. 6 days after she went missing, her body was found hanged in the woods 5 miles from her home. A second video was uploaded to the site that same day. I didn't know if I wanted to watch it. I remembered being awake those nights, just burning with curiosity and terror, needing to know what it was, what Jane had seen. As I paced my living room, trying to push myself to ignore it, I knew I would watch it, and a few minutes later, I did just that. Emily 12 Part 2 starts with a gritty video of a party. The camera moves among the older men and women, who smile and wave as they drink. The first thing I note, aside from the crappy quality of the video, is the attire. Men have big glasses, women have their hair sprayed stiff and curled, like something from the 70s, except it couldn't have been because as the camera reaches the kitchen window, we see her there. Emily Forster, taken in 2019 and chained to a pole. It is night, but there is a floodlight outside, and the identity of the girl is unmistakable. Emily stands and cries in the backyard. The cameraman raises his beer, the same beer as that which littered the yard in the previous video, as if giving her a toast. Emily is suddenly alert. She looks back to the dark behind her, listening. The man once again points to the ground, but Emily refuses to kneel. He tries 2 more times, but she stomps her foot in defiance. She turns to the black behind her, as if she heard something, and starts to scream. The cameraman turns back to the house. Everyone now has their back turned to the camera, all facing away from Emily. They stand there, their backs to us, doing nothing else. The video ends. Once again, I realized the timeline didn't add up. The first video of Emily running away was posted months before it happened. Again, I felt sick. I decided I was done with it. I left the site and the computer. I put it out of my mind and decided I wouldn't dig anymore. I didn't care who was next. I was done. And then, a few months later, the site updated. It was all over Reddit. Everyone was talking about the diary. I couldn't help myself. I went back on. Instead of a video, there was a picture. It was the cover of a red diary. The label read, "This diary is the property of..." But the name had been scratched off. There was an arrow at the bottom. I clicked it and the picture changed to the first 2 pages of the diary. The date read August 9th, but the year had also been scratched off. The first few pages were regular diary entries. It belonged to a girl in middle school, or at least it read that way. Then there was a really strange entry. Unlike the others, it wasn't about the boys in her class she had a crush on, or her friends who mostly liked her for her pool. This one was about her sister, who had died a year earlier from anaphylactic shock. It read, "It's been 1 year today since Cindy died. My mom said if I can't talk about it, I should write about it, and I definitely can't talk about it. It was the worst night of my life. I can still feel the bunk bed shaking. I hear her choking, but the worst part, even worse than hearing my sister dying, is how I just lay there, listening, too afraid to do anything, until finally the shaking stopped. She had been bitten by a spider. It wasn't super venomous, but she was allergic. Mom got rid of the bunk beds, but when I wake up, I still see her arm sticking out above me. Then my eyes adjust, and I realize I'm just looking at the ceiling. One night, I woke up feeling like I was being watched. The feeling was so strong that I was more scared of turning on the light than I was of being in the dark. What if I see what's watching me? And then I noticed that the terrible feeling was all coming from one spot in my room. Not a dark corner where something might be hiding, but the stand-up mirror by my closet door. I got up and walked over to it, hoping that seeing it up close would lessen my fear a little. But I still hadn't turned the light on, so all I saw was my silhouette. Something was off. I couldn't tell what. I couldn't see my face, so I don't know what it could be. But the reflection in the mirror, something about it was off. I threw a sheet over to cover it up and went back to bed. The mirror was tall and the top curved, so when it stood under the sheet, it looked like a person just standing there in the corner of my room. The feeling that I was being watched never went away. Actually, it got much worse. I kept it covered for the next 2 weeks. It was only when I absolutely had to pull the sheet off that I finally did. It was really late one night when I heard someone tapping on the glass of my window. My room is on the 2nd floor, so I was really scared to see who it was. A million thoughts ran through my mind while I got up and walked to the window, like maybe it was a vampire or just red eyes in the dark. When I finally got to the window and pulled the curtain aside, I saw there was no one there. It wasn't until that moment I had realized the tapping was coming from behind me. It was coming from the mirror. I was shaking worse than ever. My mouth was dry, my legs weak, but I had to know what it was. I pulled the sheet down. The tapping stopped. Again, it was too dark to see my reflection, but that wasn't my focus anymore because now I looked past myself to the rest of the room, and I saw something I didn't recognize. There was a TV in the same spot as mine, except it was a totally different model, like it was from a long time ago. And my bed wasn't my bed. It was bunk beds, like we used to have. There was someone sleeping on the top bunk. I could see her shape under the blankets, but not much else. And as I stood there watching, the shape began to stir. She woke up. It looked like my sister, but wasn't. Even though she was mostly hidden in the dark of the room, I could tell it wasn't really her. She became really happy when she saw me. She rolled from the bunk to the ladder on the side, her arms and legs stiff like they had been after she died. She limped toward me. I turned from the mirror and saw my room as it really was. There was no one in the dark, but when I looked back into the mirror, I saw what she really was. That was the end of the entry. I turned the pages, and on each one there was only one sentence, the same sentence written over and over again, sometimes a dozen times, sometimes hundreds. It still haunts me. It haunts me to wonder about what she saw that night, and the nights that followed. The sentence that covered the rest of the diary was simply, "Don't look in the mirror."
Sophie was watching the news when she thought she heard someone in her hall. She put the TV off and went out and checked to see was anyone in there. Suddenly she jumped when she looked up her stairs and saw a figure duck into one of the rooms. She went back into the living room and rang the police straight away. She was scared an awful lot knowing in her town there was a serial killer attacking women in their own homes. This week so far, there were 2 murders, and the police knew that there was a high probability it was the killer in her home, so they arrived fast. There was a knock on the door, and the policeman went in and looked around to see was the man still upstairs, but he had noticed a window open, and he must have jumped onto a tree near it and climbed down to make an escape. The police officer told Sophie what he had seen and took a statement from her. He told her he would take another look around, but do not worry, as there were 2 police officers outside her driveway in a car watching her house. When Sophie was alone, she had an idea. She had an app on her phone that filmed her door whenever there was movement, even if anyone didn't know. She had realized the intruder might not have even been near the door, but she gave it a try anyway. When she went into her app, she had realized the camera did film someone at her door. She froze when she had realized there was a man at her door who was the exact same policeman who was in her house, looking around, except he had no police uniform on him. Suddenly she ran out to the two policemen in the car and had seen that both their throats were slit and one of them had their police jacket and hat taken from them. She heard a noise and turned around. When she turned around, she saw the man who was posing as a policeman. He smiled and said, "You should have checked your app before you let a stranger in your house." Then he lifted up his gun and shot Sophie in the head. Sam was on social media for a few years now, but didn't get half of the views he would have liked. He decided to hatch a plan to gain loads of followers and viewers. His plan consisted of him driving a taxi that he usually does, but something different for a live stream. He rigged the taxi with lots of cameras to film his customers. He had something very different planned for them. That difference was that he would have a needle in the back seat full of poison, and each customer who gets in would be killed from the poison going into their back. The needle tips were spread all over the back, so no matter where they would sit, they would get jabbed. He murdered about 10 people when his live stream went up to about 100,000 views. The local sheriff of Sam's town got tipped off after the 5th person was killed, so he was tracking the car by people giving tips of what was in the background of the live stream, giving away where it was originating from, even though Sam was constantly on the move apart from stopping for customers. The viewers helping the police eventually knew Sam seemed to be driving to his house. A while later there was a SWAT team outside Sam's house, and they knew from the live stream he was in the garage. He could see he was holding a gun up to people, and the SWAT team broke the garage door down and shouted, "Stop!" Sam jumped with fright, and one of the police officers' guns went off and shot Sam between the eyes. Then 10 of his victims came out shouting and screaming. The detective was relieved the poison in the needle didn't kill them, but must have just put them to sleep. Then things got worse than he could ever have imagined. When one of the people said, "Oh my God, why did you shoot Sam? We are all actors. This has all been a stunt. None of us were killed. Those needles were just rubber. They weren't real needles. We were just helping Sam stage a fake, crazy live stream of him killing people." The sheriff checked Sam's pulse. He was dead, and they realized he was guilty of staging a fake mass murder spree. The story begins in the year 1899, when a monstrosity of a lighthouse was built in an island off Ireland. The weather and storms surrounding the area were lethal, and some say at the worst of times there would be waves 100 feet high. This lighthouse had to have people working there, but it was taken into account when building the lighthouse that if they did have one person living there, they would be so lonely and it would affect them so much being isolated, it would drive them mad. But if there were two, then them being together out in the middle of nowhere, it could drive them to kill each other. So that is what made it clear there would be 3 people working in the lighthouse. It went according to plan until 1900, when a photographer and his assistant and a very skilled sailor sailed out to the island so the photographer could take photos of the lighthouse keepers and the lighthouse and island. It was then that everything got very strange, as they turned every stone in the island, looking all over for the 3 men, but couldn't find a trace of them. It was like they disappeared into thin air. It was not like them to have been swept away by being outside, as they usually always would go inside and bolt the door and stay in when it became evening, as they knew how dangerous the weather could get. The photographer was thinking of writing a story about the strange disappearance when suddenly he realized there was a crumpled up piece of paper in the room that he hadn't noticed before. He opened the paper, and it had written on it, "I will help you solve the mystery of the lighthouse keepers and their fate. Wait outside the lighthouse at 4 p.m. The photographer was standing outside the lighthouse, hoping it was the right part, as it was so big. He was really anxious to find out who wrote the note and what they would say. There was no one on the island when they went looking, and they looked everywhere. Plus, the island wasn't that big. Suddenly, it got very stormy, and he could see a huge wall of water coming straight for him. It was then he realized that he wasn't only going to learn how the men died, but die exactly the same way. Just before the wave hit him, he saw the 3 ghosts of the men right in front of him. Jack was a criminal into all sorts of criminal activity. He was in court for so many different crimes. He spent 10 years in prison, but since he was released, he didn't get reformed. He just got better at not being caught for whatever crimes he committed. During his last court appearance, the judge had told him that if he keeps getting arrested, he will be put into prison for good. One night, Jack was trying to rob a bank, but then it went horribly wrong, and he ended up shooting a police officer. He knew it was the death penalty for capital punishment. While he was waiting on death row, there were several groups against the death penalty and wanting to ban it outright. He sat in prison writing and writing about his feelings, trying to pass the time. He had no access to the internet or newspapers, but still found out about the groups that were pushing for the death penalty to be banned. It was a prison warden on death row told him the first day it was finalized, he would not be getting the death penalty. He would not be sentenced to death. He was relieved, but then felt even sicker, knowing he would be locked up in a prison for years and years until he finally died. He wondered how he would stay sane. To his surprise, one day, a man in a suit opened his cell and said to him, "Hello, Jack. My name is Terry. I am the head of New Beginnings. I am the leader of the group that has successfully banned the death penalty. You are the first person we are trying the alternate punishment out on. You just need to go through a quick operation, and then you are free to go out into the outside world." Jack couldn't believe his ears and knew there must have been a catch. The next day he was lying in a room with doctors all around him, and when he woke up, the doctor said, "Hi Jack, your procedure is done and you are free to go. Jack asked what was the catch, and they told him, "You will see, but don't worry, Jack, you won't be hurt, and you won't ever get locked up again." When Jack left the room, none of the officers acknowledged him or said goodbye or good luck. When he was walking down the street, no one acknowledged him. It wasn't until he tried to make a phone call from when he was home he found something strange. No matter what number he rang or text he tried writing, nothing happened. He knocked at his friend's door. There was no answer. Suddenly his friend's car pulled up in his driveway, and Jack said, "They set me free," but his friend didn't seem to hear him. He didn't see him. And then he knew. The new punishment for him not getting the death penalty was being immortal, invisible, and alone, with no chance of lifting an object to let anyone know he was there. He knew he was immortal because there was a voice inside his head told him. But that voice told him that now that he knows he will be alone, it also told him no matter what he lifts, he will think he lifted it. He will think he opened doors. He will think he threw glasses if that's what he done. But to anyone else, there will be no one or nothing there. Jack would be invisible, alone, and immortal. Susie was feeling down as she had no cell phone for a whole 3 days. That might not be a long time to most people, but to Susie it felt like a whole month. She missed being able to scroll down news feeds and swiping through pics, etc. on social media. She knew it would take her a long time to save up for a new phone, so she decided to go into the local pawn shop to see could she pick up a second-hand one. She settled on a cool new-looking phone and paid her money and walked home. She couldn't wait till she got home to check it out, so she turned her phone on and was surprised a logo popped up on the screen right away. It was a circle with W in it. She just assumed it was some sort of app, so she clicked on it. That night she was sitting down watching TV, enjoying a good thriller movie, when her phone screen lit up. She checked to see what the notification was. She dropped her phone from her hand when she saw what she couldn't understand. It looked like a very pale woman's face came very close to the screen, and there was an awful sound came from her phone. She put the phone down again and continued to watch the movie. Suddenly it lit up again. This time she was hesitant in looking to see what it was, but when she did, the W logo popped up on the screen again. She tried to go into it, but when she did, it said, "We are currently in private beta. Please enter password if you have one." I realized by looking at the top of the screen it was an app called Whoop. I checked the Google store to see was the app there, but there was no sign of it. I was going to go back to watching the movie, but I decided to Google Whoop app. I was shocked when I read what came up. It said, Whoop is a musical and social media app that was under development. The creator, Sarah Bell, and sole owner, was violently killed on Friday night while going for what seemed like her nightly walk. No suspects are being questioned at the moment, and there is no motive. The homicide is still under investigation. What I saw underneath the article sent shivers up my spine. It was a photo of a woman that looked exactly like the woman that popped up on my screen earlier. I went into her photo gallery and panicked when I saw many photos of the woman who was murdered. I turned off the phone, wondering what was happening and what exactly was that short little video I saw. I knew it was her, but was it actually a video of her being murdered? And why did it pop up in the phone when I didn't even touch it? I jumped in my seat when I saw my phone light up again. I panicked big time this time, knowing I had just turned the phone off. I was reluctant picking up the phone, but when I did, the words "be careful" were on the screen. Then as soon as I saw them, they had disappeared. I heard a noise at the door and thought it was my mind playing tricks on me until I heard footsteps. I knew now there was someone in my house with me. I felt a freezing shiver run up my spine, and a lightheadedness with a mixture of fear and panic consume me. Suddenly, a figure appeared in my room. I was expecting to see the woman who got killed standing there, but it was a man. The man spoke. "Well, now there. Don't be frightened. I had to kill that bitch because she stole my unique software for her app. You see, I was her partner before she got greedy and wanted to take full control of the app. You might wonder why I'm here and how I found you. Well, you can thank the wonder of technology and those great Find My Phone apps. I was just on my way to the pawn shop today when I realized someone had bought it. It made things so much more awkward for me, knowing that I will have to kill another person this time, a person I don't even know, to retrieve the phone. You know that if they got this phone, well then they would get me as the killer. You might ask why I didn't take the phone with me that night. Would you believe I took her damn wallet thinking it was her phone? But then again, maybe that made the cops think it was some random robbery. I froze in fear, wondering what he was going to do to me. Suddenly the phone made a sound, as if I got a new message. Then the screen burst into pieces, and a piece of glass stuck in the man's eye. Blood came squirting out. Then a hand came out of the screen and choked him to death. Tony was in the woods last week with a few of his friends, and they were with this guy that was new from school, who claimed to know all about black magic. Tony and his friends didn't take him seriously. The guy was called Gerald. Gerald had asked Tony, did he know much about black magic, and Tony said, trying to keep a straight face, "Oh yeah, I could write a book on it." His friends knew he was being sarcastic. A few nights later, Tony was sitting down watching TV when he had spotted something on the ground that hadn't been there before. He was trying to figure out how it got there. It seemed to be a book. The cover was just plain, and the book didn't seem to have any title. He began to start reading it. He read, "I was just sitting down, relaxing, reading, when I started hearing weird sounds, but I didn't know which direction they were coming from. It just seemed like there was a weird sound in my ears. Then suddenly the lights went out for a second and came back on again." Tony felt a shiver run up his spine as the lights in his living room had just gone out the second he had read that the light had gone out, and then the light came back on again, just like written in the book. He began to read on. He read, "I was wondering what was happening. I felt weird, but I didn't know why. I couldn't explain what was happening. Then suddenly a light entered the room." Tony was freaking out at this stage, as there was a light entered the room after he read about it happening in the book. He had decided to just shut the book and forget about it, but his curiosity was getting the better of him, so he read on. He regretted reading it As soon as he read the sentence, Gerald walked into my room and went to attack me. Tony knew martial arts, so was ready for him and threw him over his shoulder. Gerald hit his head off an ornament and blood poured from him. Tony knew he had killed him. Tony knew it was self-defense, so had decided to call the police. But before he rang, he saw a page on the floor. He read what was written on it. Gerald will come back to life and possess your body. Tony turned around and, without even being able to react, was possessed by Gerald. And then Gerald spoke in Tony's body. Now, Tony, you will be able to write a book all about black magic.
Vamos a jugar en el 43.
I can't help if you don't talk to me.
You won't believe me.
If you tell me you saw Bigfoot or some creature in the woods, I will believe it. I promise. Tell me your story.
There were no creatures, spirits, or monsters. It was just me. It was my first time as a caretaker in Yellowstone. I barely knew the place, but when I saw it for the first time, I fell in love instantly. I was in complete awe of it. The mountains that reached up to the clouds and the valleys which cut beneath them. The forest which ran vast and all-consuming throughout. And then there was the wildlife. It was overwhelming in its beauty. And people left the park in November for the winter season. And that's when I came in. I was to remain there until the plows could reach me towards the end of winter. I was the only one in my section, alone for miles and miles. My job was to clear the snow off the roofs of some of the buildings and structures. That was pretty much all I was supposed to do, but it kept me busy. There was always more snow to clear. I enjoyed the solitude. I'd been craving it for some time. When night fell, my cottage was the only source of light. The entire landscape, mountains, rivers, and the forest, all of it was dark. It was like an ocean of black, if you can picture it. And a tiny pin drop of light in the middle. That was me. I read books and made dinner. That's how I spent my nights. One day there was a storm. The snow was falling so thick and so fast that I couldn't get past my own front door. I decided it was too dangerous to try going out, so I stayed in, knowing that I'd have to do double the work the next day. But it was okay, because it was better than being caught outside in a storm. That could be death if you couldn't find shelter. That night after dinner, I read as I normally do. But as I did, I noticed a strange sound. A soft, wet hum. I heard it before, only when I was absolutely silent, but I could never place where it was coming from, or what it could be. So I forgot about it. I kept reading, and when I was too tired to read another word, I turned out the lights and went to bed. It woke me from a sound sleep. I was so tired and disoriented, I wasn't sure if I had heard something or if it'd just been a dream. Slowly I came out of my fog, and then I knew it hadn't been a dream. There was a knock at my door. I couldn't imagine who it could be. I was miles away from anyone, and in a storm, it would be impossible to get to me. I tried to look out the window by my bed, but it was too dark. I picked up the gas lantern and lit it. Then I moved to the door. When I opened it, the wind hit me like 1,000 needles. I aimed the light out, but there was only snow and darkness. Beneath me, though, I did notice something. Footprints. They led from my door to just outside the window where my bed was, then back out into the black. Sudden terror came over me as I looked out over the dark. I closed the door and latched it shut. After sitting in fear for a few moments, my exhaustion caught up to me again. Though I was afraid, I could think of nothing I could do. So I put the light away and I lay in bed. The following morning I woke up and remembered, but I had no idea if I had dreamt it or if it really happened. I opened the front door and found there were no footsteps outside. And though I let myself believe it had been a dream, a part of me knew that the snow would have filled in the footsteps if they had really been there at all. The sky looked just as bad as the day before, but if I didn't clear the roof before another storm, the other stations could cave in. I can't express the fear I felt walking through the woods that day. Any noise sent shivers up my spine. I was convinced someone had been there last night, watching me sleep. But if it was true, why wouldn't they wait for me to open the door? And how could they have survived the storm? I cleared the roofs from the other buildings, and as I did, it began to snow again. By the time I started my journey back to my cabin, the snow was too thick to see through. I was caught in it, and worse, I was lost. My compass seemed to be working, but the more I followed it, the less I recognized my surroundings. My feet burned from the cold, my bones shivered. Then darkness fell. I thought that was it. I would die right then and there, frozen in the woods. And then I saw a light. I thought maybe I had left the lantern on, but I remember turning it off. But I didn't care either way. I was glad because the closer I got, the more I realized that yes, it was my cabin, and I was home. The door was locked when I tried to pull it, but how could that be? Unless I was wrong. Maybe this was someone else's cabin. Maybe I wasn't as far from the other caretakers as I originally thought. I knocked and waited. The wind blew cold all about me. I moved to the window and saw the person inside. It was me. I stumbled back into the woods and hid. I watched as the person inside opened the door and looked out, the lantern held out ahead of them. I watched closely, trying to understand. Then they quickly went back inside and closed the door, as if they were afraid. Against all odds, I found my way back to the buildings I had cleaned and slept inside. I nearly froze to death that night. The next morning, I stood in the woods and watched the cabin for as long as I could before approaching it. When I finally did, I found it empty, and the door was unlocked like I'd left it. It felt foreign to me now, like I was in someone else's home. Like when you have to stay at a stranger's house, except all the things in it were mine. The only thing familiar was the smell. It was tart and sour, but in my time here I'd grown to love it, and I was home. Outside, the world was frozen. The life and beauty I had been struck by when I first arrived had long since faded. I was afraid of the day because I could look out my window and see what was outside. I didn't want to see. But of course, the day was nothing compared to night. I needed the heater, but it lit the cabin from inside. I felt naked, exposed. I couldn't see anything past the windows. The only thing in them was my own reflection. I lifted the mattress off the bed and leaned it against the glass. I didn't need the bed. I had no intention of sleeping that night. I sat across from the door and watched it. Every time the wind blew and shook the door, I felt my stomach turn cold. At first, I couldn't tell if I was really hearing what I thought. The screams swelled and faded, or maybe they were just shrieks of wind pushing through the pines. I found the lantern and opened the door. The world was black. The light ahead lit only a few feet in front of me. I could see snow on the ground, snow falling in tiny specks, but nothing else. When it came from my right, I would aim the light towards it. Seconds later, it would be on my left. It was in front of me. It was behind me. It was close. It was far. I was terrified, and before long my fingers began to burn. I had to go back. When I did, I put the mattress back down on the bed. I was too tired. Fear and vigilance had taken it all out of me. I lay in the bed and listened, but there were no more screams. I had dreamt it, and I decided, or imagined it. If it was real, she would have seen my light. She would have seen it by now. The orange glow of the heater through the window. If it was real, maybe I would see her footsteps in the snow in the morning. Or perhaps she would wake me with a knock. These thoughts swirled in my mind, but I knew they were nonsense. I just needed sleep. And so I closed my eyes and did just that. The following morning I woke up and remembered that I had no idea if I had dreamt it or if it really happened. I opened the door and found there were no footsteps outside. And though I let myself believe it had been a dream, part of me knew the snow would have filled in the footsteps if they had truly been there at all. There was no way to know. I looked out over the ice and the dead trees and the leaden sky, which seemed like a concrete slate about to drop. I couldn't face it. I couldn't go out and do my job. I knew something was out there. I didn't know what, but it was there. Between the trees on the other side of the hills. I sat on the floor facing the door again. I stared at the wood of the door and listened. I wondered about her, the woman who screamed. I wondered if she had died in the night, and if so, would she come now? Would she come knocking and ask why I didn't help her? In the silence of the day, I could hear it again. The strange hum. The wet, sticky sound I knew I could never place. And then something fell in front of me. Small like a speck, but solid. I leaned down to it. It was white and wriggling. A maggot. Something tickled my hand. I looked down and saw another maggot crawling across my knuckles. Another one dropped from above, falling on my shoulder. I lifted my eyes up. On the ceiling, there was the shape of a small square door. I had forgotten about it. Forgotten about the attic. It was too small to go into, meant only for storage. At the edge of the square door, maggots writhed and dropped. Something was there. Something had been there the whole time. That I could place it now. It was the sound of 100,000 maggots feasting. I moved the heater to the center of the room and used it as a stepping stool. I climbed it and reached for the door on the ceiling. The smell, the familiar smell I've grown to love, was overpowering here. My eyes stung, my throat closed. I lifted my head to the attic. His small body entirely covered by them. A blanket of maggots so thick I couldn't even see him.
Did you remember then that you hadn't come alone?
Yes, I remember.
They still haven't found your wife. Is she up there in the hills?
Just behind them. They'll have to wait for the thaw. It was a brutal winter. I tried to tell her there was nothing out there, nothing but ice, but she ran anyway. She ran for me when she saw what I'd done to our son. She ran begging for help, screaming for it, but there was no one out there. I listened to her screams until they died down, until there was only silence and dark.
Why did you do it? Didn't you love them?
With all my heart. Too much. It was all I knew. It was suffocating. Some men shouldn't have that much love. Some men should just be alone.
Hello, my name is Brian. Some people have a genuine phobia against clowns. They are genuinely petrified of them. I don't have that phobia. I have something much worse. I have a good reason to fear clowns, and Ferris wheels, and carnivals. The reason will become very clear as I go on and tell you my story, and tell you exactly what happened to me and two of my friends. After this story you will see why I never ever visit a carnival when it visits my town. It was a few years ago me and my friends visited the local carnival, and at the time we had so much fun. You see, it wasn't what happened to us in the carnival freaked us out, no way. It was what happened afterwards. We were eating popcorn, we went on the Ferris wheel, and laughed so much at the silly clown who was extra funny. But that night when I got home, I was tired and went straight to bed. I must have fell asleep fast because I had such a bad nightmare that the clown in the carnival was holding a knife up to me and was about to kill me. There was all weird stuff happening in the nightmare. The next day in school, I was telling my friends about the nightmare, and they surprised me and shocked me by explaining to me in detail the same dream. But instead of what happened to me in the dream, it happened to them when they had their dream. Exactly the same, besides them being killed instead of me. Things don't end there though. The weirdest part about it is that no one in my town remembered any carnival coming this year. They said the last time the carnival came was last year. Me and my friends didn't have a clue what was happening because the three of us knew we were all at the carnival just 2 nights ago, and that night we all had the same dream. When the summer came, there was a poster for the carnival out, and to my surprise there was a photo of the exact same clown that tried to kill me in my dream. And before the dream, I have never ever laid my eyes on the clown. I froze in fear, knowing that it was exactly the same clown that was in my dream, and wondered how the hell this was happening. It's not as if I had a memory of a clown like him before. Me and my friends stayed away from the carnival for the whole 5 nights they were there. The day after the carnival left, there was pandemonium around my town, as there were 2 kids missing. People were putting up posters, and when I looked at the posters, I saw 2 of my friends' faces. I felt content knowing I had stabbed and killed both of them, but I didn't know why. They were my friends. But then I heard a voice inside my head telling me, "You have passed this incredible plan of mine I conducted from the other side. I was a killer in your town years and years ago, so many years that folk today would have forgotten about me. Yes, but I hate that they forgot about me. But thanks to me having the power to get into your dreams and harness the energy, even when you're awake, yes, daydreaming, and your daydreams became a reality, that has made me a very happy clown. I looked in the mirror and snapped out of my daydream, and when I looked in the mirror, I was dressed as a clown and was just after stabbing myself in the neck." My wife and I bought a house that was quite cheap for the area, and that was 2 years ago. We have 2 daughters together. At first, everything was fine, and nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. Then one day we would find every chair, pot, jar and other household objects all divided into 2 corners. One corner of the household objects had a red mark on them, while the other half of household objects had a blue mark. We tried putting things back to where they were supposed to go, but everything ended up being divided into their corners again. Then one day I awoke with a blue mark on my arm, and same with my oldest daughter. We both found ourselves with the other household objects that also had a blue mark on them. My wife and my youngest daughter had a red mark on them, and they awoke alongside the household objects that had a red mark on them as well. We then brought in a psychic, and she told us that the spirits from the married couple who used to live in this house are now finally divorcing in the afterlife. They have split up everything 50-50 and marked them red and blue. Red is for the deceased husband, and the blue is for the deceased wife. My wife and I looked at each other, as we both knew we would be taken away. We knew we had to get out of this house or sell it as quick as possible. Then one day, some of the household objects that were divided into red and blue had disappeared. Our daughters were part of the disappearance. The 2 spirits are slowly taking their 50-50 divorce splits. Me and my wife are just waiting for us to get taken now. Tracy was very upset after her husband went missing 20 years ago. Her husband Barry was only 30 when he disappeared. Tracy still used to sit crying, looking through photo albums of better times. She used to find it hard to look at photos of her and her husband, but she wanted to keep his memory alive. Tracy tried different techniques to contact her husband. She visited a psychic and even had a seance, but nothing worked. Lately, she had a huge urge to dig a hole in her garden at a particular spot. She went out one day into the spot where she had the urge to dig and began digging. She didn't know where she was getting her energy from, but she kept on digging and digging and digging. It eventually got too dark, so she had to call it a day. The next morning she was out doing the same thing, digging and digging and digging, until eventually when she was over 30 feet down, she came across a door. She wondered what was the door doing over 30 feet underground. She turned the doorknob, expecting it to be just the door stuck in the dirt. But to her surprise, she opened it to a beautiful landscape. She thought she was dreaming. Then a man that looked familiar stood in front of her and said, "You bitch." Tracy couldn't believe her eyes, but knew that the man standing next to her was her husband Barry, who would now be 50. Then suddenly Tracy woke up, thinking what a strange dream. The first thing she'd done, even though she knew it was a dream, was go out to the garden where she dug the huge hole in the dream. Of course there was no hole, but she thought of something. What if she dug a little? Not 30 feet, but just a little. She had the urge to dig, and she knew she was awake this time. A few minutes later she began digging. She hit something hard and got her start. She bent down on her knees and took away dirt, revealing a hand. Then it all came back to her, guessing the dream had unopened the repressed memory of her killing and burying her husband. It was a lovely summer's day, and me and my friend were taking a trip in my private helicopter. Everything was going great. We were enjoying the view until we started to fly over my house. I noticed something strange. It was like a masked man was carrying my wife to my outside pool to throw her in. I quickly told my friend, "Look below, what's going on? Do you see down below? There's someone carrying my wife into the pool." I quickly flew the helicopter down and saw that a masked man was carrying my wife, and just as he got low, we could see him throw her into the pool. He ran away, and when the helicopter eventually landed, he was well gone. I ran over to the pool and jumped in, but by the time I did, my wife had already drowned. My friend rang the police for me, and when they came, I told them what had happened. We were flying over my house when all of a sudden I could see a masked man carrying my wife and throwing her into the pool. They asked did I have any enemies, but I couldn't think of any. My wife was in the bat, and I walked in, knowing what I had to do. I grabbed her by the neck and put her under the water until she stopped breathing. Then, when I knew she had died, I rang the girl of my dreams, who kept at me the last few months to end it with my wife once and for all. It was her plan. When she answered the phone, I told her what to do. "It's done, she's dead, but what you need to do is wait until about 3 p.m. tomorrow, dress up as a man, put your hair up, I'll convince my friend you're a man, carry my wife, I'll fly over the house in the helicopter, and when you see us go lower, run up to the swimming pool. I'll fly over the house in the helicopter, and when you see us go lower, run up to the swimming pool as if my wife was alive until you threw her into the pool. If they think it's a man that drowned her in the swimming pool, there is no way they will trace the real drowning back to me drowning her in the bat. And remember, the most important thing, baby, is I love you." Jeff was a very nice guy who wouldn't harm a fly, but one day he met a psychopath who offered him $1 million if he wouldn't kill his own twin within 3 days of an experiment. Jeff laughed at the idea, knowing he would never ever harm his twin, as he was the only person he truly cared about in the whole wide world. Jeff's parents unfortunately died in a car crash 5 years ago. Jeff also needed the money to pay off his mortgage and other bills he had outstanding, so the idea of being offered $1 million for not killing his own twin was too good to be true. Jeff even told his twin Darren about the idea, and Darren said, "Go for it." Jeff knew in his right mind he wouldn't kill his twin, but he feared they would drug him or something to drive him crazy, and he took every precaution his twin would be safe, and then he would collect his $1 million and they both would forget about their crazy plan. The first day the experiment started, Jeff was put into a white room. There was no chair or table or anything else, just a plain white room. After a while, Jeff felt dizzy and faint without any food, and the whiteness drove him crazy. Eventually he tried to lie down to get some sleep, but as soon as he did, loud music came into the room. He didn't even have a clue where the music was coming from, as he saw no speakers. The next day he woke up, and one of the walls was replaced with a huge mirror, so he could see himself in the mirror. He stared at himself and realized how tired he looked. When he went to sleep, he slept sound until he woke up. Darren's voice filled the room through the hidden speakers. "Well done, Jeff. You are doing great. This is day 3. You've just a few hours before you collect your $1 million. Good luck." Suddenly more loud music filled the room, and this time it seemed to be so loud he was wondering why the mirror didn't crack. Suddenly it stopped, and Darren's voice filled the room again. "Okay, Jeff, you're doing extremely good, but you might wonder why the mirror didn't crack. That is because it was reinforced, bulletproof glass that wasn't affected by the noise. But there will be a gun appear on the ground just now. You just need to make 10 different movements in the mirror and then shoot your reflection. Then you are free to go. Also, don't be surprised when the glass breaks, as the bulletproof cover to the mirror was lifted, so it's just an ordinary mirror now." Jeff made 10 different movements and lifted the gun and shot the glass. He then froze when he realized on the other side of the glass his reflection wasn't him standing holding a gun. It was him lying down dead on the ground. Darren walked into view and said, "Well now, Jeff, I guess you won't be getting your $1 million. You see, I told a little white lie. Maybe, I'm not sure, or was it I left out some very important detail concerning you? That mirror was a mirror, yes, and you were looking at your reflection. But when I had lifted the bulletproof shield, it was the mirror that lifted. What you were looking at, making those 10 movements that you thought was a reflection of you, was really your twin. He had no idea what I said to you, but my twin Jason was telling him that if he copied every move you did in sync with you in the next 10 movements, you will be out of here. And you see, he didn't realize I meant you'd be out of here dead. I'm sorry, Jeff. I can't have you walking out here alive and blabbing all about my little experiment. But before I kill you, didn't I tell you I'd make you kill your own twin within 3 days?" Then Darren lifted the gun and shot Jeff in his head. Joshua was an elderly farmer who was living in rural Ireland. He was feeling very isolated on the farm since his only daughter moved to America, where she was working in a rest home in Texas. One day he had an idea while walking around his farm. He had noticed really nice wood to use to carve walking sticks to make and send to his daughter as a surprise. The only problem was that where the wood was, it was a fairy fort. Legend had it that folktales associated with fairy forts typically relate a curse or retribution enacted upon those who would disturb or destroy the structures. As he carved the wood into the sticks, he prayed that nothing would happen him doing so. After he had about 20 sticks made, he sent them over to his daughter as a gift. His daughter Sharon was working in a rest home, but lost her job 6 months ago, but didn't want to tell her dad. She had a problem with drugs that was spiraling more and more out of control. She was popping the strongest painkillers and also using crystal meth. She didn't want to tell her dad how much of a mess her life was in. She sat down in her trailer, worrying about paying back a loan shark $10,000 that she got off him for a loan. She got the loan to pay off a local drug dealer that she knew didn't mess around. If she hadn't gotten the money, she would have been killed, and if she can't pay back the loan shark, she knew she would be killed also. But she thanked God she was able to get a loan of $10,000 to get the drug dealer off her back at least. One day her dad's walking sticks arrived, and she felt a pang of guilt and pain that he went through all that trouble of carving walking sticks for the residents of the rest home he thought she still was working in. She had put the $10,000 in the bank for safekeeping until the drug dealer called for it in a few days, as it was way too dangerous around her neck of the woods to keep that much cash in her trailer. She wrote out a check and sent it to her dad. Her dad was delighted to cash the check for $10,000. He rang her to thank her, and she froze and then said, "Dad, I am so sorry, that check was meant to have been for $10, not $10,000. Then the man that was looking at Joshua counting the money behind him ran up and hit him in the head and grabbed his wallet. He saw him put all the money in. That night the drug dealer arrived, and Susan told him the story. The drug dealer started laughing and said, "Do you think I'm stupid? You just ran out of chances, bitch." Then he shot Susan dead. Joshua found out about her death a few days later and regretted ever stepping foot inside the fairy fort, knowing it was the fairy fort that made everything go wrong. Sharon was walking down the street, sure that someone was following her. She didn't dare look behind, as she would rather just walk on and hopefully get to somewhere where there were people around, other than turn around and have someone attack her. It was getting dark, and she saw a train station across the road, so she walked across to it. When she got into the station, thankfully there were other people in the platform, but strangely, she didn't feel any bit safer. She thought about getting on a train, but decided to just wait by a group of people first to gather herself. She assumed it was just her paranoia, but there was something bothering her that she didn't know what it was. People were acting strange, and she had noticed there were police around. She had wondered why there was no train, as she was standing there for a few minutes now. There were lots of people looking down in the track, across a tape that said police line "Do not cross." She didn't realize sooner because she seemed to be in a daze, wondering why she was feeling so strange. She wondered what all the people were looking at, and when she walked over and looked down, she screamed with horror as she looked down at herself, dead on the train line. She was screaming and screaming, but no one seemed to take any notice of her. She had then noticed someone had made eye contact with her, and they seemed to notice her. They walked over to her and said, "Did you just realize you're like me, one of the dead?" She spoke on. "Don't worry, it gets better. I watch the news to see where there are local deaths. That way at least you can talk to someone." Sharon froze, taking in the words that the girl was telling her, realizing she was dead. Me and my husband were driving one night. I remember it well, as it was snowing heavily. We were driving through the snow, and it seemed to be getting heavier and heavier. I remember my husband saying, "Hey sweetie, this snow is getting heavier and heavier." With that suddenly there was a screech, and the car skidded on black ice. The car toppled over, but luckily we both survived. We didn't even have to be hospitalized. A week later I was looking through getaway breaks, and I thought it a good idea to me and my husband leave our town for a week and go to stay in a cabin in the woods out in Utah. We drove there in a new car that my husband bought because he needed a car to drive to work 2 miles from where we live. We were driving out to the woods for what seemed like days, but in reality was only hours. When we got there, we were in awe of how beautiful the cabin looked with the trees surrounding it. It was just a beautiful sight. My husband stopped the car and turned off the engine. When we got out, he said, "Did you hear that?" I said, "No. What is it?" He smiled and he said, "Absolutely beautiful silence." That night we had decided to go for a walk in the woods. My husband heard it first. There were footsteps behind us, but when we turned around, there was nothing. We walked on, then suddenly I heard it this time. When we turned around, there was a person dressed in black, wearing a hoodie. I screamed, and my husband said, "What the hell are you following us for?" There was a man's voice. "Let's play a game called The Hunt. It's kind of like a game of hide and seek on steroids, or maybe hide and seek on acid. I will give you a head start of 10 seconds to get the hell out of here, and after that I'm coming after ye with my gun, and I'm going to shoot ye both dead." We didn't bother ask any questions, and just ran and ran as fast as we could. As we were running down the road, I was counting down the seconds, and exactly when I reached 10, I heard running behind us. Suddenly there was a shot, and I fell to the ground in pain. Then the man shouted, "This is no fun. Ye can at least make it a little hard for me. I'll tell ye what, I will give the bitch 60 seconds to recover and to get the hell out of here, and after that I'm coming to hunt ye down and shoot ye dead." My husband shouted at him, "Get away, you crazy bastard!" The man shouted back, "Is it a wise idea to really waste time like that?" I eventually got up and put my arm around my husband, and after a minute we were just down the road a little bit when my husband screamed as a bullet hit him right in the back of his leg. He buckled down in the ground in pain. The bullet had hit the back of his kneecap. I was screaming as the man walked right up to my husband. Then the man put the gun right to my head and said to my husband, "Would you like me to kill your wife?" Blood was pouring from my shoulder where I was shot. The man said to me, "You have something to tell your husband, don't you? Something about the crash." I said to my husband, "I was pregnant." Then the man said, "Okay, tell him the real story." Then I turned to my husband and said, "Those bullets that were shot at us, well, I got shot by a red paint bullet, and you got shot with a real bullet. That's why I didn't feel pain getting shot, even though, of course, you thought I did. But you felt the pain. But that pain you're feeling isn't half as bad as when I lost my baby in the car you crashed." The man pointed the gun at my husband and said, "My baby you killed." And he shot my husband in his head. It was a summer's night in a downtown theatre that 5 people were alone together in the theatre. Alone because they were rehearsing for a very, very dangerous magic trick for the next night. They acted everything out as if the theatre had a packed house. Sam Days was a hugely popular magician and was trying a really elaborate trick. The trick was to give his helper a gun and to her shoot him and him catch the bullet in his mouth. And to make it harder, if he didn't catch it with his mouth, it would go straight through his mouth and out the back of his head, hitting a barrel of gasoline. The bullet was an expanding bullet, which meant it would penetrate his skull if he didn't catch the bullet. Sam's hostess, Sherry, was standing on the stage with him. The other 3 were in the audience watching. They would take part in other magic tricks after. Sam walked on the stage and said, "Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you all to the wonderful world of magic. I am your host, Sam, and this is my beautiful helper, Sherry. For my first trick, tonight I am going to do a very, very dangerous trick. It is so dangerous that there have been several people killed from attempting it. I am going to put a twist to it even. I have a barrel full of gasoline put behind me, and Sherry is going to shoot me with a special bullet that expands. So if I don't catch this bullet with my mouth, it will be game over for me, and, well, you all better run for the hills, because it will go right through the barrel and cause a mighty big explosion. So, I'll just get on with the act, shall I?" Sam smiled and gave a gun to Sherry and walked back to stand in front of the barrel. Sam said, "Ready when you are?" Sherry held up the gun and pulled the trigger. The bullet went through the air and everyone gasped when Sam couldn't catch the bullet and the barrel went up in flames. They all looked shocked with horror as Sam burned with it. Suddenly, before anyone could call the police, there was another gunshot, and Sherry fell to the floor as someone had just shot her. Jack was sitting down waiting for his call and noticed Ginny and Patrick, the remaining 2 people, were gone. He knew there were just 5 of them in the theatre as they locked the door after entering, which meant the killer had to be either Ginny or Patrick, the only 2 remaining besides himself. Suddenly there was a noise behind him, and he jumped up from his seat. It was Ginny and Patrick. Patrick said, "What in the name of God is there a fire for?" Jack was so shocked he had forgotten all about the fire. Patrick ran up on the stage and fetched the fire hose to put the fire out. He had just seen Sherry lying down on the ground dead and screamed but ran over to put the fire out still. Jack said to Ginny, "Which one of ye killed Sherry? What the hell is happening?" Ginny said, "Sherry is dead. What the hell happened, Jack?" Jack said, "This is madness. I'm calling the police." He picked out his phone to call the police. He told them what had happened and to come fast. After a few minutes, finally Patrick had the fire put out and saw the burnt body of Sam. He walked down to where Ginny and Jack were sitting. Jack said to Patrick, "Where the hell were you? It could have been only either 2 of ye, the killer." Patrick said, "Are you crazy? None of us killed anyone. There must be someone else in here." 10 minutes had passed, and the police hadn't arrived. Jack got up to walk up and down the theatre. Ginny whispered to Patrick, "Something isn't right. I don't think he rang the police." Suddenly there was a shot, and Ginny screamed as Patrick was shot in the head. Ginny looked around, terrified, when she saw Jack run up to her and shout, "What did you do?" Ginny shouted, "I didn't do anything. It was you who shot him." The police suddenly arrived, and Ginny told them everything that happened, and about Jack shooting him. She didn't see him shoot him, but it had to be him. There was no one else in the theatre. Jack was arrested, and after some investigation and speaking with the theatre's owner, they learned that the owner's jewellery worth $10 million had been stolen from his safe, which was opened with his key. He told the police that Jack must have used some magic trick to retrieve the key from him. Sam Days was missed dearly by his fans, but little did they know he pulled off his biggest trick by staging his own death by falling down a trapdoor when the blast happened, knowing there was already a scorched body inside the barrel with gasoline. He didn't want to kill Sherry and Patrick, but had to, as he stupidly told them about his fantasy about stealing the theatre's owner's key and open the safe and steal the jewellery and live the high life. He knew if he hadn't killed them, they would tell the police, and plus he knew now that Jack got all the blame, which suited him fine, as that sneaky Jack had tried to constantly best him in magic tricks, but now he won't ever be able to best him. Sam smiled, lying on a beach, knowing he finally pulled off his best magic trick, the ultimate disappearing act, his fake death. Hello, my name is Martin. It was a sunny day in June. Me and my friends were visiting a local park where there was a very big house and a beautiful garden. The house was open up for visitors to look around, and there was a shop and even a restaurant. I am a huge fan of mazes, but was never in one in real life. I just did them in books and comics or wherever I came across one. The main reason I wanted to visit this park house was because I knew there was a maze there. When me and my friends arrived at the maze, I was so excited, but I felt that excitement drain away when my friends said they weren't going in because they heard a story that one time a boy our age went in there and was never seen again. I told them that it was just a silly urban legend that wasn't true, but they were adamant they weren't going in. I could see the fear in their eyes, and I couldn't understand why. I told them, okay, if you want to spoil the party, that's okay, but I'm going in and enjoying the maze. Besides, if anyone was going missing in there, don't you think we would have heard of a lot more people going missing? I walked in and was amazed at how high the ditches were. I could feel the excitement overcome me. I felt that my friends were missing out so much, but suddenly, after a half an hour walking around there, I felt for the first time a pang of fear, and a few minutes after that, I wish I hadn't gone in. I shouted out loud to my friends, but all I could hear was the echo of my voice fill the air. I suddenly got the weirdest feeling someone was watching me. I panicked, thinking it was the boy who vanished, who my friends were telling me about. I walked around and around and around. I had enough of the maze now. I wanted to get to the exit to get out of it. Suddenly, I heard some shouting, and to my relief, I realized it was my friend Sarah. When I got out of the maze, I acted like I wasn't afraid and said, "That maze is so cool. I was walking around for hours, it seemed like, and I genuinely couldn't find my way out. They must have designed this maze so well." That night I was in my room, but that was when the weirdest thing had happened. I walked out of my room, and when I walked into, which should have been my hall, I was in my room again. I suddenly saw a door in another direction, and once again when I entered it, I was in my room. This kept happening over and over and over. I could not make any sense of it, because I could look back and see my room, and turn around and look in the door and see my room again. I was panicking, thinking of the maze, knowing what was happening to me in there is happening to me right now in my own bedroom. Suddenly I fell over something when I was going through the door. It was a book. I picked it up, and the title read, "The Maze." I opened it up and read the first page, and a shiver ran up my spine. The publishing date was 2020, and the year at the time was 2010. I looked at the writer's name, and it was my best friend Sarah. Then I read, 10 years ago, my friend entered a maze that me and my friend warned him about, and he never was seen again. We had warned him of exactly the same thing happening another boy years ago, who we cannot find out who it is. I stopped reading, then jumped when I heard a voice behind me. I turned around. My dad was staring right in front of me and said, "Son, don't be afraid. That maze gave you a secret magic that will make up for any friends you may never have seen again. You will understand as time goes on. I know, trust me, I was that other boy that went missing." Hi, my name is Siobhan. I was really stressed lately and needed a break away, so decided to pack up work for a week and book myself into a lovely looking hotel in a really nice resort in Florida. Judging by the photos online of it, the place was exactly what I needed. I just needed to get away from everything for a few days, so hopefully a week would do the job. When I had all my luggage packed, I got the cab to the airport and was on my way to Florida. I was so happy knowing I would spend the next week away from all the stress of everything that was going on lately. I was very confident I would feel so much better after the break. When I arrived, I checked in and got the elevator up to my room, left my baggage and headed straight for the beach. It was so relaxing just lying down on the beach, with the air blowing in my face. I felt like I was just about to feel the benefits of what I'd feel spending a whole week in this beautiful resort. That night I was in the hotel's bar, and I was feeling kind of fed up, thinking that in a week I'd be back to my ordinary life and the troubles and stress will be waiting right for me. But I knew I just had to make the most of being here. Suddenly a guy walked up to me in the bar and said to me, "Hello, I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but I just saw you sitting there and you looked kind of lonely and a bit fed up, to be honest. And I was wondering, would you like some company?" I looked strangely at first, wondering, did I really look that fed up? And then I replied, "Well, sure, thanks. I guess I'd enjoy some company." The man asked, "So, where are you from?" I told him I was from New York and decided I needed to have a break away from the stress in the Big Apple. He smiled and said, "Do you know something? That makes a lot of sense to me, and trust me, this place is like a paradise. If you like, I can show you around sometime." I smiled and said, "Sure, that sounds like fun." Then the man said, "Oh, by the way, pardon my manners, I didn't even ask your name. My name is Sam. What's yours?" "My name is Siobhan. Nice to meet you, Sam." The next day, I was relaxing on the beach with Sam. He spoke. "To be honest, when I saw you alone and looking kind of down, I had to come and say hello." I looked confused and asked him why. He replied, "A few weeks ago there was this beautiful girl who was sitting by herself in the bar, just like you were, and well, she looked to be upset over something. I was going to introduce myself and ask her would she like company, but I didn't. And well, the next day I found out she was after committing suicide by jumping off her room's balcony. I felt so sorry for the girl and told Sam that there was no way of him knowing she was so upset and was going to commit suicide. That night me and Sam were in the bar having a few drinks and speaking. I wondered would it be too soon. When we were in my room, we sat on the bed and had another drink. Sam stood up and said to me, "Do you know what I love most about this hotel? The beautiful view from the balcony." We both walked out to the balcony and were admiring the view. I said to him, "It's beautiful." Suddenly Sam put his hand on my back and was about to push me over when I took my taser out of my pocket and tasered him. He jumped back, feeling surprised I was ready for him. Then I said, "That girl you were telling me committed suicide. We both know that she didn't jump." Then I held my phone up and showed him a picture that was taken of him without his knowledge, with text underneath it saying, "Help, call the police, this man is going to kill me." I called the hotel and asked for my friend Lisa, who you pushed, but when they had sadly confirmed to me she had committed suicide, then I had an expert in facial recognition do a background check on you, and boy was I happy to know that you were working in this hotel. I knew the police would let you off, so I have my own idea of justice. Also, thanks so much for letting me know what type of lunatic you are by wanting to push me off the balcony also. But I'd just like to know why. Why would you want to kill an innocent woman after just killing an innocent woman just a few weeks ago? With that, the door was knocked open, and I heard police shout, "Stop, police!" They walked over to me, and they couldn't even see the damn man lying on the ground. I was cursing this hotel's CCTV footage for picking up my face and letting them finally see me when they were looking for me for months. And I was wondering why, because I knew I was on the run, but didn't know why. It was months later I had learned There was no man. I suffer from a condition called dissociative disorder, which means I was the man, but there was never a man, and it was me who killed my friend. Hello, my name is Roy. It was a winter's night. Me and 3 other people were invited to spend the night in a room that had a prize for just staying there. It was a very attractive idea, as we were sent links of photos and videos of the room. It was just an ordinary room with no crazy stuff in there. First I was wondering, would there be saws and torture equipment in there, like the movie Saw? But the link showed photos and videos of the room, as I said, and it seemed harmless. But let's get back to the prize. The prize was $100,000. I first wondered, was it a prank or a joke, but I decided to give it a go. I mean, what harm could it do? The night came, and when I arrived there were 3 more people, a couple and a man. We started talking about how we were sent a link to take part, and how we were reluctant in taking part. There was no one greeted us at the room. We were just sent a link on our phone that gave us a tracking device to give us GPS directions to get here. Then there was a room with a code to enter in the middle of an abandoned building. It was all really creepy. There didn't seem to be anything in the room, just 4 boxes and 4 TVs on the wall. I was wondering what it was all about. Then suddenly one of the TVs came on, and a person in a hood and mask came on the screen. Hello there, and welcome to the room. As you know, if ye stay here ye will win $100,000, and that is true, but there are just a few tasks that ye have to do first. There will be 3 of the TVs on the wall changed to a live stream in just under 2 minutes, and then you will see that I will give ye instructions on how ye can win your $100,000. And remember, ye can all win $100,000 each. Just follow simple instructions, and the money is yours. Suddenly, 3 of the other TVs came on, and a couple and a man were in shock when they saw what was on the screen. I could see my wife strapped to a chair, gagged, and the couple started screaming as they saw their 2 kids, a boy and a girl, strapped to a chair and gagged, and a man had been screaming about his wife, which also was strapped to a chair. The man spoke again. Well, I wasn't disappointed with the shocked reaction, but let me explain why ye are watching your loved ones attached to a chair. But before I do, I have a little surprise for you. Suddenly a masked figure walked up to each person in the videos. The man spoke again. What ye are watching is a video of your loved ones, and the people holding a gun to their head are ready to shoot them dead in just under 30 minutes. Unless ye do something very easy, just put the gun to your head and pull the trigger, and yes, the guns I will give ye are loaded. There is a box in front of ye, and your guns will be in there. Just pop in the code trigger happy, and your box will open, and then retrieve your gun. Remember, you have 30 minutes. Also, I'm going to throw ye a lifeline. If ye aren't up to killing yourself, then if you kill another person in the room, then your family will be free. Same as if you kill yourself. Your family will be free, and no harm will fall upon them. It's really easy and exciting, so let's start the game, shall we? We all stared at each other in shock, trying to take in what was happening. the man on his own spoke. "What is this? I can't let my wife die." I said, "Don't do anything stupid." 10 minutes passed and no one shot themselves or each other. But after 15 minutes, the man shouted, "I can't take this anymore," and pointed the gun to the man who was with his wife and shot him. Then he shot the man's wife and then shouted, "I'm not a killer, but they're going to charge me for murder and put me in prison for a crime that I only did out of love for my wife." With that, the man shot himself in his head. I was standing alone in the room, in shock, wondering what would happen next. Then the man came on the TV again. "Congratulations, it looks like things worked out very well for you in this situation. Your wife will be freed and free to go." With that, the door of the room clicked open, and I walked out in shock and rang the police and explained. Luckily, I had secretly filmed the TVs with my phone and was able to show the police. My son was just 13 and walking out of a garage when one car bashed into another, and well, the first one went smashing into my son, killing him instantly. The car sped off, but I had the presence of mind to ask my friend Fred to wipe the CCTV, as I knew if the license plate numbers were given to the police, then the justice they would be served wouldn't in any way equal my justice. They might not even serve time. So luckily my friend Pat had a great idea. He would use his contacts to get their plates looked up, find out who they were, get them matched to the CCTV to make sure no one would be in the wrong. He had his gun loaded with 2 real bullets to shoot the couple, and the third one for himself, which was a fake bullet, which would blast him with fake blood. Very realistic. You might wonder how Pat had got away with it, since the police would be looking for his body. But that was all sorted. They did find his body, which was changed very fast after the couple were killed. Pat had used the mask of an addict we shot in the street. Pat had an amazing skill in creating lifelike prosthetic masks. The hardest thing about it was lifting the addict's body in. It was so heavy from the dead weight. I sat back, really happy with myself, and my wife happy also, knowing that me and Pat and her were the only ones that really knew what really happened in that room. I thought of the police watching the video, thinking they had evidence. That I was a victim traumatized that survived hell. Then I smiled and said to my wife, "It just goes to show, it's not always you can trust what you see." Then what about the gunmen who are holding the guns to the people's heads? Well, I've only 2 words. Deep fake. Two police officers were driving down the road on a quiet summer night when they spotted something strange. There was a car stopped at the side of the road, but it was in a position that a car shouldn't stop in since it was out in the middle of the road. 2 of the police officers walked around to the car to investigate, and they nearly got sick when they realized what they saw. They had seen a woman lying lifeless inside the car with towels stuffed into her body and most of her organs removed. One of the police officers turned around and got sick, but the other was more experienced and was used to seeing sick things, so he just took out his notebook and started writing down notes. Then he rang back to the station to call in the crime scene. The police officers wondered what type of sick person could do that to anyone. They wondered, was it some dark ritual or even a sacrifice taking the baby out of the body, because there were really strange stories around the town for years and years of witchcraft rituals in the woods, and this road was by the woods. When they went back to investigate more looking into the car, they felt a strange presence, and when they looked back into the back seat, they froze in fear of what they saw. They turned around and saw a baby stare at them, and not cry or whimper, but they still knew the baby was alive. They couldn't comprehend how the baby got into the car, and also wondered how the baby could have survived being taken out of the mother's body. The two officers seemed to be in a daze. When they took the baby out of the car, one of the officers realized there was a newspaper article stuck in the baby's hand. It was as if the baby was clutching onto it for dear life. The newspaper article was about a serial killer that died in prison 2 days ago, and before his death he became obsessed with being reborn through a human sacrifice. It sounded sick, so he didn't read on. One of the officers had a crazy idea he didn't tell anyone, but since he had the opportunity he went ahead with it, and knew people in the right places, so he got someone to run a DNA test on the baby. A shiver ran up his spine when he realized a hit came up on file, which was the same match as the murderer who wrote the notes about being reborn through a human sacrifice. Hello, my name is Jake. I used to get upset over my daughter Sarah's last boyfriend, Fred, as he was an ex-convict. So was it hard to blame me? I mean, what father would be delighted with their daughter going out with an ex-convict? He was in for drug dealing, and the thing is, she has moved on, but to be honest, her new boyfriend is worse. The first day I met him, me and my daughter and wife and her new boyfriend Tom were having a meal. Tom just gave me a cold stare, and there was something dark and void in his eyes. My wife and daughter hadn't seen it, but I knew he was hiding something. I don't know what, I don't know how big, but I just knew. I tried telling my daughter, "Sweetie, I know that you think you know Tom, but are you really sure you really know him? I mean, put it this way, he doesn't seem to talk about his family much." My daughter cut me off. "Dad, why do you question everything and everyone I go out with? Tom is a very caring guy, and he has been there for me the last few months, and especially since Fred has become a crazed stalker who just won't get it into his head that I am over him and don't want anything to do with him. Tom has told him to back off, and to be honest, I don't think he would have, only for Tom frightening him or whatever he did to get him to back off. I was really scared my daughter was going to get into trouble with this stranger Tom, so I used it to my advantage what she had just told me about Tom frightening her ex Fred. I said to my daughter, "Well, there you go, sweetie. You don't know what he did to Fred. Did he threaten to kill him, or did he have him beaten up? I mean, let's face it, Fred doesn't seem the type of guy to just back off. You were months trying to get him to stop stalking you. I was hoping to find something to prove I was right about my daughter's new boyfriend Tom, so I did some research and typed his name into the search engine. Millions of results came up, so I tried doing the image search of him and the town and the company he is meant to work for. I was hoping he wouldn't appear at all, that he was just giving a false name and he would be cut out way before anything bad happened to my daughter. But my hopes were dashed when his face popped up. Things came to a head one Friday night when me and my daughter went to Tom's house. She was delighted I had accepted to go to his house for a meal. My daughter went in and had just realised I'd left my phone in my car, so I went out and fetched it. A few seconds later, I heard a gunshot from inside Tom's house and my heart started racing. I ran into the house and saw my daughter crying inside there. I told her, "Get back." I had a gun with me at all times for protection, and my daughter knew about it. I told my daughter to stand back, and I kicked the door in and could see my daughter's ex bleeding to death on the ground. Tom was standing there shouting. I shot him in the head and explained to my daughter I had to, as he had his gun held to my head and was going to kill me. My daughter rang the police, and while I was waiting I saw her on the laptop and asked her what she was looking at. She told me, "Don't worry, Tom has CCTV inside the house and outside. I'll be able to show the police that you just shot him in self-defense." Then I noticed I could see my hand go in the window while I was pretending to fetch my phone, but I had went around knowing the window was open. All was ajar. It was a habit Tom had that was a real advantage to me. I was seen holding the gun in the window to the back of him and shooting Fred. My daughter knew now that it was me who shot Fred, and I had planned to burst the door open, pretending to have had to kill Tom before he had killed me. My plan was ruined now. That's why I knew what I had to do before the police came. I knew they would know that it was me that purposely set up Tom to look like the killer that killed Fred, but it was really me, and it was really me who killed Tom because I wanted to, not because it was self-defense. And I knew what I had to do before the police came, so I held the gun up to my daughter and pulled the trigger. Jake was watching TV, and there was a program on about a hiking trail he always wanted to do. He knew it was a very long hike, and it would require a lot of perseverance, as the trail went on and on for miles. It was in the outback in Utah. He didn't want anyone to go with him on the hike, as he was looking for something to take his mind off his very stressful job as being a lawyer. Jake just wanted to relax for 2 weeks on the hike into the outback of Utah. On the day of his hike, he figured he would need snow gear, as the weather was so cold. Sure enough, when he was on his way, it began to snow. He picked the wrong time of the year, he told himself, but he proceeded to go through the trail. He was using his phone as a compass, but it didn't seem to help him much. He seemed to be getting nowhere. There was a huge snow blizzard arrived, and he tried to trek through the snow and find shelter. Eventually, he luckily came across a cave. He rested, hoping that he would get the energy to move out of this rut that he found himself in, trapped inside a cave in the middle of a wretched snow blizzard. He felt himself getting more and more disorientated. He felt like he could not even move with the numbing cold. He could feel the sting of the ice on his skin, and he felt he was going to die. But that survival instinct crept up in him and told him what he had to do. What he had to do to survive. He hoped the blizzard would pass, but unfortunately it went on for days and days. He had no problem with water, but he knew that if he didn't eat anything soon, he would eventually die. He was thankful of the snow he used for drinking water. He felt weak and looked down at his pants, knowing there would be a lot of meat on his leg. He knew what he had to do to survive, so he took a large knife from his bag and proceeded to cut parts of his leg off to eat. He died faster than he would have if he starved, as he bled to death in the freezing snow. Susie was walking down the road one night in the countryside when she was surprised by hearing a phone box ring. She wondered who would be calling a public phone box, especially in the middle of nowhere. Well, it was near a bus stop, but besides that, no one was around, unless they were waiting for the bus, of course. She had decided to answer the phone when she was surprised to hear a man's voice. "Hello, is anyone there?" Susie said. "Hello, yes, I'm here. I'm sure you must have the wrong number. This is a public phone box." The man spoke again. "Oh, maybe I did call the wrong number, but thank you very much for answering and letting me know. I must say, you have a very nice voice. I am very sorry if I put you out of your way, but it was very nice to speak to you anyway. I guess you must be wondering why I'm calling a public phone box. Well, it was very nice to speak to you. I hope you're having a good night." Susie felt strange, a stranger calling a phone box, asking her was she having a good night, but she liked how he spoke, so replied, "Yes, I'm having a great night, thanks for asking. I'm just waiting for the bus to go home now." The man said, "Oh, I'm very glad to hear you're having a good night. So the public phone box is near a bus stop then, I gather." Susie was enjoying the chat with the man, but realised the bus was coming, so quickly said, "I'm very sorry, I have to go. The bus is coming. It was nice talking to you. Bye." The man said, "It was very splendid talking to you also. Bye now." Susie walked into the bus and felt happy for some strange reason. About the phone call, the man had left a good impression on her. She was wondering, was it his voice or what he said, and she wondered what he had looked like. When she got home, she told her sister Rachel all about it. "I was waiting for the 10 o'clock bus, and well, I was very surprised to hear the public phone ring in the phone box right next to the bus stop. I answered it, and there was this really sweet man on the other end. And, well, we had a lovely chat, but unfortunately the bus came before I could even tell him my name." Her sister smiled and said, "Wow, what age was he? I wonder what he looked like. Maybe he looked like a film star." Susie said, "I'm not sure what age he was, and of course I have no idea what he looked like, but he seemed so sweet." Rachel said, "Are you going to wait at the bus stop again tomorrow night to see if he calls? How do you expect him to call the same phone box again at the same time? It obviously was a wrong number he dialed." But the next night Susie made sure to be waiting for the 10 o'clock bus again, and was pleasantly surprised when the phone rang again. She ran into it and answered. "Hello? Hello, Susie. I am very happy that you were waiting for the bus again, and you answered the phone. I was hoping you would. I hope you're happy that I rang this phone again. Are you, Susie? Susie said, Well, yes, I kind of enjoyed speaking to you last night. The man said, Well, that is splendid. Our feelings are mutual then. Tell me, Susie, is there anyone else waiting for the bus? Are you alone? Susie said, Yes, I'm alone. This is a very quiet road, you see. Not many people ever wait for this bus. The man said, Oh, it must be in the middle of the country then, Susie, since not many people catch the bus. Susie saw the bus coming up the road and said to the man, I'm sorry, the bus is here. The man said, How about we continue our conversation tomorrow night? Same time, Susie? Susie agreed. The next night at the same time, the phone rang again. The man said, Susie, I'm not sure I even told you my name. My name is Fred, Susie, and do you know, I love your voice, but I would love to be able to put a face to that voice. How about we meet in person, Susie? Would you like that? Susie thought about it, then quickly said, Well, yes, if you would like that, sure. She gave him the directions to the phone booth and told him she would meet him at 9:30 tomorrow night. Back at Susie's house, her dad was reading a newspaper article about a serial killer at large in their locality and the surrounding areas of the countryside around their village. He was worried she was out late and was just about to call the police when she had walked in the door. Susie felt a strange feeling. It was like she was in love. She felt it strange knowing that she hadn't even met the man, but still felt strangely in love with him. She told her sister about her meeting him tomorrow night. The next day, when Susie asked to go out, her dad said, No way, you're not going anywhere tonight. Susie was mad until her sister had an idea that maybe he would allow both girls go to the cinema together. Rachel was going to the cinema while Susie would meet the man. Rachel said to Susie, Look, Susie, I was thinking about this. Maybe it's a bad idea. You were going to meet this man. I mean, he could be anyone. He could be a madman for all we know. Susie laughed it off and said she would meet him and was sure he would be a really sweet guy. When Susie was on the bus, she heard a conversation between two people who were talking about a serial killer at large, a man who was targeting young women. Susie felt sick thinking of the stranger she was about to meet. She stayed on the bus and knew she couldn't go home, so she would go back to the cinema and join Rachel. But Rachel was worried about her sister and had already gone to meet her by the phone box. When Rachel was outside the phone box, she had been calling her sister's name, but all she could hear was her own echo. Suddenly a man walked out from the ditch and said, Hello, Susie. It is so great to finally meet you. Rachel froze as the man went near her and she kicked him. The man said, Oh, now, that's very nasty out of you, Susie. Very nasty indeed, and I have to punish you for that. He dragged her into his car and put her in the boot and shut it. Michael had a drink problem for years, and his wife Anna hated it, knowing that she could expect him to fall in the door any night drunk and angry. She tried her best to get him off the drink by calling different experts in dealing with drink problems, and he went to Alcoholics Anonymous, but she knew ultimately it had to be him that would need to help himself to stop drinking. It came to a head one night when Michael and his wife were driving. She begged him to not drive and to get a cab instead, but he insisted he had only one drink. As they were driving down a quiet country road, the car swerved but not soon enough before they hit a young girl. Michael and Anna were terrified, and Anna shouted at him to call the cops, but Michael pleaded with her not to and to just drive home. It played in her mind every single day and every single night, just leaving the poor little girl on the road. She wondered, did she die instantly, or was she in pain beforehand? When she watched it on the news, she made up her mind that if Michael took one more drink, she would leave him. So she gave him the ultimatum that if he drank again, she would be gone. She knew that would be his worst nightmare, because as much of a drink problem he had, she knew he loved her more than anything. Months passed where he didn't have a drink, not around her anyway, and she expected he couldn't have been drinking behind her back because she would notice him more spirited than usual. She never got over the hit and run that they never owned up to, but other than that, at least Michael was off the alcohol. One night she came home and jumped with fright when she saw Michael had fallen down the stairs, and was disappointed to see he had drank so much. There were empty beer and whiskey bottles scattered all over the floor and alcohol all over him. She was so upset that he drank again, overdoing so well, but to make it worse, he had now died from falling down the stairs from being drunk. Suddenly Anna jumped when she saw a little girl stand in front of her, the same girl whom Michael ran over. She froze in fear, knowing she was staring at her ghost. How does it feel to have the ghost of your little girl come and kill you after knowing your husband still started drinking, even after killing me and promising you he wouldn't? Then she held up a knife and slit Anna's throat. Later that night, the little girl was writing in her diary, "That stupid woman and man that killed my twin sister have paid a tiny price for killing my twin. I wanted that evil woman to think her husband had started drinking again just before she thought she was staring at the ghost of the girl her husband killed, and I kind of liked the idea of me putting all those tablets in his coffee to knock him out, then bang his head to kill him, and pouring the beer down the sink and putting that and whiskey around him to make it look like he was drunk and fell down the stairs. But as I said, that's a tiny price they paid for what they did. They would have ran over me also if I didn't run into the bushes to run after my dog Rex. I wish I was killed that day, and I wish it wasn't just my poor twin sister. Now that I killed them, I feel some kind of relief, but not as much as I hoped. I wondered, should I have made their deaths more slow and painful?" I had a very tragic event happen in my home years and years ago. I was left a mansion in an estate in the middle of the country, and trust me, it was a very beautiful, mystical place. You could see the history written all over it. But one day I had a falling out with a man. That man was my uncle. He was left money, but that's it. But you see, he wanted to claim some of the land around the mansion, and no matter how many times I told him that none of the land was his, he wasn't having it. One night I eventually called a truce, but in reality, I had planned on murdering him, which I did. I poisoned his wine and hid him down in the wine cellar. I tied him up to the wall with shackles to make the most of the space and built bricks around him to suit the rest of the wall. I tried to do it perfectly, whereas people would think it was just a part of the wall. For years and years I felt an eerie atmosphere in the house, and I just put it down to my nerves over what I did. Thankfully, he didn't seem to haunt the place like you'd see in some spooky houses, where paintings would float along the air, etc. One night, I brought a beautiful lady I met down in the village home for dinner. We were enjoying the dinner, but she didn't really like the wine I chose. I asked her to choose one below in the cellar, proud of my collection of wines over the years. I must have collected hundreds of bottles of wine. The girl went down to the cellar and was in awe with all the different wines I had on display. I was standing back wondering what she would choose. Suddenly I noticed something strange when she handed me a bottle that stood to hairs on the back of my neck. It was the same brand of wine I used to poison my uncle. It wasn't the same bottle, of course, but the exact same brand. She gave me a smile and there was something in her eyes. Had she known that my uncle had been poisoned by me, using this brand? Was she just playing a sick game with me before calling the police? Was she the police? All different questions swam around in my head until I realized something was moving. It didn't make a sound, but it was definitely moving. I panicked, but couldn't let her notice the fear. She'd turn around if she noticed. I had fear over what was happening before me, behind her. What I was seeing with my own eyes, but what I could not make any sense of. What I saw was a brick move, and my uncle's huge eye stared out at me. I remember he had lost an eye in the war, but I hadn't seen that eye for years, not since the day I killed him. I told the girl we should go up to finish our meal. It will be getting cold. She gave me a quizzitive look, as she knew we had practically finished our dinner already. Suddenly she turned around and screamed when she saw my uncle's eyes staring right at her from the wall. I didn't know what was happening. How could my uncle be alive? I had to stop her screaming. I had to stop her screaming. It kept getting louder and louder, so I grabbed the bottle and smashed it over her head. As she fell to the ground, my uncle burst through the wall and looked at me sadistically and said, "That girl could have chosen any bottle out of your huge collection, but will I tell you why she chose that one? Because I summoned her, here to take her soul, to bring me back to life." It was Valentine's Day, and I was looking forward to go out on a date with my girlfriend for months, but unfortunately it was a lockdown, so we couldn't go out to any restaurant or anything. My girlfriend lived with me, so at least we could cook something at home and have a nice romantic meal. She sat down on the sofa watching TV while I cooked her the meal. About an hour later I called her out to the kitchen, and the table was set with candles and all to give it that romantic atmosphere. We started eating the meal and my girlfriend told me how delicious it tasted. She asked what it was, and I told her it was mincemeat with vegetables. After the meal we both sat back down watching a romantic movie. I was really enjoying the night. I gave my girlfriend a glass of wine, and within a few minutes I was feeling drowsy. I wondered why, as I had the sleeping tablets and painkillers crushed up into her glass. but she somehow must have noticed. I had planned on knocking her out and tying her up and revealing to her when she awoke I had that bastard Jack who she was cheating with on me. I had him tied up and gagged in the basement, thinking my plan would go according to plan. I did worry I'd be arrested for kidnapping though, as I was just going to try to scare them, but somehow my girlfriend knew my plan and switched the drinks to me get knocked out instead of her. I'm writing this letter by force. My girlfriend is pointing a gun at me, with her ex standing by smirking as I write. I don't know what they are going to do to me. My girlfriend is asking me to write what I think she is going to do to me. I write, I hope my girlfriend will let me go and tell me she's finished with me, but forgive me for tying Jack up and trying to knock her out with the tablets. She looked at the ending and smiled, then said, "This is just what I wanted." I wondered what she meant. She told me, "Because you cheating bastard, I know you have another girlfriend, and her name is Sarah, so now she's going to get the blame for murdering you, not me." She pressed the gun to my head and said, "Right, I hope Sarah leaves me go." I said, No, Sarah is innocent. She has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with it. Now write Sarah's name. Write, I hope Sarah will let me go. I eventually wrote Sarah's name. My other girlfriend and Jack laughed, and both said, "Happy Valentine's," and texted Sarah pretending to be me. "Come over, please. I have the house free. My girlfriend is gone out of town." As soon as he sent the text, he rang the police, pretending to be an anonymous neighbour, hoping Sarah would arrive at the same time they did. Sure enough, the police arrived just a couple of minutes after Sarah was in the house crying, and she was arrested for murder with the letter as evidence. Who is Short Story 1? He is a horror writer who writes on horror subreddits on Reddit. His stories are vastly unique and sometimes don't even make sense. He has had a couple of popular short horror stories that was well upvoted and lots of Reddit users had commented on. Short Story hardly ever replies to comments, and one theory suggests is that he is a mental patient in an institute for the insane. Some even suggest that he has had multiple brain surgeries and was even experimented on. This would explain for Short Story 1's weird plots that don't make sense, because insane people don't make sense. Another theory is that Short Story 1 is 1,000 years old, and because he has lived a so long life, his stories are a reflection of what he has experienced throughout the ages. This would also explain why his grammar is terrible, because language has changed so much in the last 1,000 years, and Short Story 1 has failed to keep up. Another theory is that Short Story 1 is an actual alien that is just having fun with the humans on Reddit. Short Story 1 being an alien would explain so much about his writing and why it's so absurd. Maybe Short Story 1 is lost in our planet and has no idea what he is doing at all. Short Story 1 is maybe an alien that has transformed into a human and is struggling dealing with the human mind and emotions. The last and most likely theory is that Short Story 1 is artificial intelligence robot and someone experimenting the robot by letting it write stories on Reddit and seeing humans react to it. As we know, technology is evolving so fast, and robots in the future are now a strong possibility. Driverless cars have evolved so much, and Short Story 1 might be a robot that can imagine. Who do you think Short Story 1 might be? Have you read his stories? Hello, my name is Michael. I used to love eating dinner with my dad and mom and sister. We used to have a salad one day, a pizza the next, then a nice homemade Chinese curry. But one day my dad decided to drive us to McDonald's. When we went inside, I loved it. I loved the look of it. I loved the taste of the food, and I loved everything about it. And so did my dad, my sister, and my mom. We all had a Big Mac and fries. We really enjoyed it, and to be honest, I was really looking forward to go back to McDonald's again. But what really made things take a bad turn is when my dad brought us back there every night that week. Me and my mom and sister didn't want to upset him by telling him we were getting tired of it, because we knew how much he enjoyed it. Me and mom and my sis were in the living room one night discussing what we would do. We knew we had to do something about it. After a while, it wasn't just one meal my dad had, it was 3, and then 4 and 5. Eventually, one day, I went cooking with my mom. We made a meal that we knew my dad used to love before he got obsessed with McDonald's. He looked at the meal when he came into the kitchen and said in anger, "What is this? We are going to McDonald's." My mom said, "Sweetie, we know you love McDonald's, but we just thought that we were having so much lately, we would like a change, and we made a lovely curry that you used to absolutely love." My dad stormed out of the house, and about an hour later he came back and put loads of McDonald's bags on the table. He shouted at us, "You think you can just forget about McDonald's?" He pulled out a gun and pointed it at us and said, "Eat up, eat everything that's in those bags." He pointed the gun at us until we ate every single thing in the bags, until we all got sick. He then smiled and said, "Don't ever disrespect McDonald's, because every time I'm eating McDonald's, I'm loving it." He then gave a sinister smile. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Thomas was looking forward to go to the cinema on Friday night. There was an exclusive invite only of a new zombie movie at 6, and right away there was a public screening at 8, which he was going to. He was really looking forward to the movie, as it promised to give a new cinema experience never experienced before. Thomas had an early dinner before heading out for the cinema. He finished his meal, then 5 minutes later he was driving to the cinema. He loved going to the cinema since he was a little boy. He knew that he loved the cinema since the very first time he stepped foot inside one. The local cinema was a 20-minute drive for him. He drove a bit faster because he didn't want to miss the start of the movie. He knew they would put on maybe 15 minutes of ads, so that gave him some extra time. When he arrived at the cinema, he went to get his ticket scanned, but was surprised there was a big crowd of people looking very upset. The person behind the counter said, "I'm sorry everyone, the cleaners are still in screen 7. We won't be long more. I'm very sorry for this. It's not cleaned yet." The crowd were growing more and more impatient, as it was now 8 o'clock. Thomas had patience, but this was driving him crazy. He was wondering would the movie be still on, or would he miss the start of it. The crowd were really irritated now with the long wait. He pretended to go to the bathroom, and as he was passing screen 7, he snuck in. He was waiting to be told it wasn't ready by the cleaners, but they didn't say anything. It was almost like the crowd from the premiere didn't even leave yet. It was so dark, it was hard to see. Thomas got out his torch. He always brought to the cinema to find his seat, as he liked it old school instead of using his phone's torch. He screamed when he could see there was a group of what looked like zombies coming for him. He said to himself it must be some sort of fancy dress for the premiere, until the lights came on, and he was then bombarded with the evil, twisted sight of what looked like zombies lying down in the ground in pools of blood. Out in the foyer, the crowd waiting were pleased to hear the man behind the counter say, "Okay everyone, sorry for the delay, but the cleaners have finished now. Ye are free to go into screen 7. Enjoy the movie." The crowd walked in to screen 7, really looking forward to see the movie. All their frustration was gone already, because all they wanted to do was watch the movie and enjoy it. When they went into screen 7, they could hear growling and couldn't register anything else, because that is when they were turned in to zombies. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Pat was really happy that he got to buy a beautiful new house for half the money that you could get anywhere else. It was just the type of house he loved and in an area that he dreamed of. Prior to finding the property, he spent hours on end looking at property sites and couldn't find anything that suited his budget. Pat used to work very hard in a factory for long hours, but for some reason he seemed to have hardly no money left when it came to paying bills. When he used to be working long hours, the only thing that kept him going was holding on to the hope of finding a property that suited him. He had a feeling one would come along. Then one day, while he was reading the newspaper, that opportunity arose. The next day, he was speaking to the real estate agent outside the house. Everything he was telling him sounded perfect. Pat was feeling so lucky, he felt like he was dreaming. He couldn't believe it. There was actually even a swimming pool in the back of the house. He used to love on his downtime to relax by the pool. He hoped he would meet a nice lady and settle down with her and start a family. When Pat was in work, these days he felt a lot happier and much more energetic. He had finally secured the dream of having a property of his own, and one of his dreams. His workmates noticed the change in him. They even said it to him. They thought he met a new woman and asked him was that the reason. When he told them about his new property, they couldn't believe it. He could even sense jealousy from some of his workmates. One night, Pat was watching TV, and suddenly he smelt smoke. He went into the kitchen to see a huge fire. He quickly got his tablet that was nearby to document the damage to claim fire insurance. He hoped he wouldn't lose his dream house over some stupid fire. Suddenly a page from a newspaper fell in front of him. He picked it up and saw what looked like his house staring right up at him. He read, "Dream house goes on sale after 50 years, after man claims the property is too haunted and dangerous to people live in. 3 people perished in a fire 4 times over the previous 10 years. The owner passed away this month, and with a lot of legal battles, the property finally goes on sale for a fraction of the price it is worth." Pat stopped reading, realizing he was in the middle of a fire. He got a start when he saw 3 people standing in front of him. They didn't seem to be one bit worried about the fire. He screamed at them to get their phone and call the firefighters. One man said to him, "Don't worry about the fire. You had to see that article to break you being dishonest with yourself. We were the same until we got a newspaper piece flying into our face. You are already dead, just like us, but now that you realize it, you can see us." Pat froze in the spot, realizing there was fire all around him, but he felt no pain. Then he looked over, behind the people, and saw himself lying dead on the ground, almost burnt to a crisp. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Mary was sitting down watching movies on Easter Sunday. She was feeling nostalgic about when her husband was alive. They had no kids, but they still loved to have an Easter egg hunt in the garden. She missed him even though he drove her mad when he was alive. It was Easter Sunday the year before, was the last day Dave, her husband, was alive. Memories came flooding back to her, the good ones and the bad. The police ruled it as a missing persons case until they found some of his clothing in the local lake. Then they said it was a tragic accident. Sometimes Mary wished he was still alive and they could have their Easter egg hunt and get sick from eating too much chocolate and then laugh about it. But that was just a happy memory that was overshadowed by loads of bad ones. She made a rule to herself to never buy another Easter egg, as it would just bring it all up again. Suddenly something caught her eye outside. she was shocked to see a bunny staring at her through the window. Bunnies also brought up bad memories. She stood up and noticed something outside in the garden. She was shocked to see it was a basket of Easter eggs. A few minutes later, when she went out to the garden, she realized there were a few unwrapped and cracked a bit. She looked inside the egg and screamed to see a hand. In the next one there was an ear, and in the next one an eye. When she looked around at the bunny, he was gone. It all came back to her. How could this be happening? Last Easter Sunday, she boiled her husband's bunny after getting the idea from the movie Fatal Attraction. They had a big fight, and she killed him and didn't know what to do except cut him into pieces and bury him in the garden. And she knew by a mark under his earlobe that it was her husband's body pieces. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Teresa was worried about her sister Judy. Judy was arrested several times in the last few months and recently was put on house arrest. She was pleased that her sister was at home and knew that all her friends were forbidden to call to see her. She knew that Judy hated being in the house the whole time, but also was happy that she wouldn't find herself get into any trouble by being able to go outside. Teresa was walking around her local park when she had noticed there was a trailer with a psychic in it. She wondered what a psychic would be like and knew she didn't believe in them, but she needed a distraction, so she went into the trailer. She hoped she was free to see her, and she was. A few minutes later, Teresa realized that the psychic had just confirmed she was a charlatan when she had been making no sense about her sister killing people today that were working in a restaurant. Teresa was smiling inwardly, knowing how could she kill anyone that works in a restaurant when she can't even go outside her door. Teresa tried to look as interested as she could, and she was actually enjoying the whole entertainment of it. The novelty value wore off fast when she had to pay the charlatan $20. She was cursing herself walking home, knowing she could have went to a great movie in the cinema and had a meal with her $20 that she spent on that damn charlatan. When Teresa got home, she noticed something looked wrong. Her door was open. She knew that her sister wouldn't have gone out. She hated prison and wouldn't risk that. As Teresa got nearer, she screamed as she saw 4 different delivery drivers dead just outside the door. Judy was standing inside the door in a daze. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Thomas was looking forward to go to the cinema on Friday night. There was an exclusive invite only of a new zombie movie at 6, and right away there was a public screening at 8, which he was going to. He was really looking forward to the movie, as it promised to give a new cinema experience never experienced before. Thomas had an early dinner before heading out for the cinema. He finished his meal, then 5 minutes later he was driving to the cinema. He loved going to the cinema since he was a little boy. He knew that he loved the cinema since the very first time he stepped foot inside one. The local cinema was a 20-minute drive for him. He drove a bit faster because he didn't want to miss the start of the movie. He knew they would put on maybe 15 minutes of ads, so that gave him some extra time. When he arrived at the cinema, he went to get his ticket scanned, but was surprised there was a big crowd of people looking very upset. The person behind the counter said, "I'm sorry everyone, the cleaners are still in screen 7. We won't be long more. I'm very sorry for this. It's not cleaned yet." The crowd were growing more and more impatient, as it was now 8 o'clock. Thomas had patience, but this was driving him crazy. He was wondering would the movie be still on, or would he miss the start of it. The crowd were really irritated now with the long wait. He pretended to go to the bathroom, and as he was passing screen 7, he snuck in. He was waiting to be told it wasn't ready by the cleaners, but they didn't say anything. It was almost like the crowd from the premiere didn't even leave yet. It was so dark, it was hard to see. Thomas got out his torch. He always brought to the cinema to find his seat, as he liked it old school instead of using his phone's torch. He screamed when he could see there was a group of what looked like zombies coming for him. He said to himself it must be some sort of fancy dress for the premiere, until the lights came on, and he was then bombarded with the evil, twisted sight of what looked like zombies lying down in the ground in pools of blood. Out in the foyer, the crowd waiting were pleased to hear the man behind the counter say, "Okay everyone, sorry for the delay, but the cleaners have finished now. Ye are free to go into screen 7. Enjoy the movie." The crowd walked in to screen 7, really looking forward to see the movie. All their frustration was gone already, because all they wanted to do was watch the movie and enjoy it. When they went into screen 7, they could hear growling and couldn't register anything else, because that is when they were turned in to zombies. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Leah was so envious of her friends because they were able to go to rock and roll concerts every weekend. Rock and roll was really taking off in her town, but her dad was a pastor and said it was the music of the devil. If he had his way, he would ban the music altogether. She just knew her dad didn't understand the music and wish he could feel it like she did. She didn't just listen to the music, she felt the music. Her friends used to tell her of great rock and roll shows they used to go to and explain how great the guitarists were and so much more. Leah used to have a pen pal where they used to exchange photos of Elvis Presley, etc. but her dad happened to come across one of her letters and got mad and grounded her for a whole week. He didn't want her to do anything that had anything to do with rock and roll. When she was in her bedroom, she was so angry at her dad for not letting her enjoy the amazing music which rock and roll was. One summer day, her friends were walking in the beach, and they came across a caravan where there was a fortune teller called Mystic Marie. Leah decided to go in. She knew her dad would definitely disapprove, as he said any power humans have for telling the future, etc., doesn't come from God, but the devil. Marie said as soon as Leah sat down, "Something is bothering you. Please tell me what it is." Leah began to start at the start and tell her that her father stops her from listening to rock and roll and going to rock and roll concerts, and she just wishes he could feel rock and roll, really feel it and its effects. She loved the effect it had on her. Marie promised her she would grant her wish. The next weekend, Leah had decided to sneak out to a rock and roll concert, and she had so much fun. Her dad must have had a premonition she would do it, because he had noticed she had snuck out. He went out looking for her, and as he was walking by a cliff, he heard a noise. He turned around to see what it was, and saw a huge rock roll towards him. He screamed as the rock hit him and pushed him off the cliff to his death. When Leah found out what had happened, she felt so guilty and blamed herself, and instantly hated the words rock and roll. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Susan had a very real fear against fire, and it started when she went out for a few groceries a year ago and left her washing machine on. She never even thought that it could catch on fire. When she came back from doing her groceries, she was shocked to the core when she saw that her house was on fire, and the fire was so bad she had to use her insurance money to buy another house. She promised herself that she would never ever leave on any appliance ever again overnight when she left her house, or when she wasn't looking at it to see was everything okay. She plugged out the TV, radio, washing machine and dryer. She switched the oven off. She didn't smoke, so didn't have that worry at least. All Susan's life, she felt tiny feelings that afterwards explained themselves. For instance, she once was on her way to school when she was 8, and she felt a strange dizziness. She didn't tell anyone, but that day in school, her friends spun her around, fooling, and when she finally stood on her own, she felt dizzy. Before the fire had happened in her house, Susan had felt very hot. She never even guessed it was because there would have been a fire about to engulf her whole home. It was one night Susan felt a strange feeling. She felt hot, but also felt cold. Most people would say it was just a fever, and she hoped that that was all it was, a simple fever. She made sure to plug out the appliances, TV, washing machine, etc., as always. She lay in bed worried. Was her feverish hot and cold feeling a warning that there will be another fire in her house? She eventually fell asleep. She was dreaming about a fire brigade, and there was a fire alarm blending in with the siren until she realized she was awake and her fire alarm was ringing. She panicked and jumped out of bed, and when she opened her door, smoke spread all around her fast. She rushed downstairs and wondered how anything could have went on fire. When she plugged out everything, she froze in fright when she saw her fridge had caught on fire, and knew now that was the one appliance she couldn't plug out, because how could she? No one would. She rang the fire brigade, and thankfully they arrived and put the fire out before it did any real damage. But her biggest fear was, what would she do about the fridge, and how could she turn it off without spoiling her food? She would never be able to sleep easy knowing her fridge was plugged in. That was the one appliance she never, ever guessed would be the one she had to plug out. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Tracy was 8 years old and had a habit of burying things in the garden. Her mom didn't really mind, as she used to remember when she was her age. She used to think she could dig to Australia, since it was cold down under. One night it was a doll she buried. The next night it was a teddy bear she buried. And it really upset her mom one night when it was a stray cat she was burying. Jackie, her mom, screamed when she saw the dead stray cat and asked Tracy where did she get it. Tracy said the devil told her to bury it. Jackie was very concerned and knew that Tracy had to be seen by a therapist. Jackie tried to find out, did Tracy find the cat or actually kill it herself? Tracy went through months and months of therapy, and thankfully she didn't bury anything else until one night. Jackie saw Tracy dig a hole, and she was amazed at how big the hole was. She said to Tracy, "Sweetie, you know you're not meant to bury anything anymore," Tracy said. "I know, Mother, but this is the very last thing I will ever bury." Jackie asked her what it was. Tracy pulled out a gun and said, "You, Mother." Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Mandy was an inspiring writer who had an agent with interest in a manuscript she had wrote. The manuscript showed potential, but wasn't publishing worthy, were her agent's words. Mandy felt a surge of excitement at the very fact her agent was ready and willing to give her a chance. But her agent stressed that she would have to come up with a whole new manuscript that proved She was a writer that had the talent to write a novel that had the potential to be a bestseller. Mandy was a carer to a very ill world-famous writer. His name was Arnold Starr. He had a string of best-selling novels, and lots of them were turned into movies. Arnold kept telling Mandy that he had his best work hidden away, and only she knew about it, but asked her to give the manuscript to his agent in the event of him dying. He gave her a key code to get into the room that the manuscript was hidden in, and he promised her that no one knew about the manuscript, not even his agent. One summer evening, Arnold passed away peacefully in his bed. Mandy had did exactly what Arnold had asked of her, and put in the code and retrieved his manuscript. She was about to call his agent when a crazy idea entered her head. What if she kept the manuscript and gave it to her agent? That night in her own home, she rang her agent and said, "Hi, I have great news. I'm finished my manuscript and I am so happy with it. I took your advice and tried my best to prove to you that you're right, that I have the talent to write a potential bestseller." After the call, Mandy settled down with a glass of wine and read the manuscript. It was exciting and gripping from the opening line. On the last page, she was surprised as she read, "There was a spirit in the house of a girl called Mandy. They wanted revenge for a wrong she did, to get even from something she took belonged to them. Mandy thought she heard a noise in her stairs, but as frightened as she was by feeling a cold sting in the air and what she had just read, she felt forced to read on. So she did. The words staring up at her were, "The noise stopped in the stairs, and the spirit knocked on the door." Suddenly the door swung open, and Mandy was shocked to see Arnold standing right at the door. He looked right at her, and his stare made her drop dead. His spirit disappeared. A few days later, Mandy's agent found the manuscript, and about a year later it was published as Mandy's first and only book, and it went on to become a #1 bestseller, which was always Mandy's dream. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Ben was relaxing watching TV when he decided to scroll through his phone and was shocked when he saw photos of himself posing with what looked like a dead body in his room. He scrolled through some more photos of him, smiling near a dead body. He not only didn't remember any of these photos being taken, but the only dead body he ever saw was of his grandfather years ago. He froze in shock and didn't know what to do. Suddenly he heard a siren outside his house, and there was a knock at the door. He answered to 2 police officers. 5 minutes later, they arrested Ben in his bedroom where the body that was in the photograph was taken. Ben was in shock, trying to explain to the police officers he didn't kill anyone and he didn't know how those photos were taken, and said they must have been photoshopped. A week later, experts analysed them and were confident the photos weren't doctored in any way. When Ben was in prison, he tried to comprehend what happened. 100 miles away, Jake, his twin brother, that he never knew he had, was writing in his diary. Finally, I got my own back on my twin brother, who didn't even know I existed. He had it all, a big house, parents, and a great upbringing, while I was bouncing from foster parents to foster parents, and most of them were drunk. Finally, Ben couldn't take it anymore and hung himself in his cell. At that exact moment, Jake felt a moment of peace and calm. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Michael and his girlfriend Sarah were invited along with their friends Paul and Susan to a new restaurant that just opened. They won a competition on the radio and were very excited to be able to walk into a restaurant and order anything on the menu and not worry about the price. They were all students and didn't have much money to spare with all the expense of college. When they all arrived at the restaurant, they were admiring the outside of it. They heard a lot about it and knew it was very expensive, which was another reason them winning a free meal was a great win. When they sat down in the restaurant and looked at the menu, they appreciated more not having to pay as the meals were so expensive. They ordered their food and ate their meals and were really impressed. When it came to desserts, Michael was the only one to order Death by Chocolate. The rest ordered just plain ice cream. They relaxed after the meal drinking coffee. When they were finished and decided to go home, they had ordered a taxi, and while they were waiting, Michael saw a truck coming straight for him and screamed. He was blown off the footpath and thrown across the street as a chocolate ice cream truck ran him over.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, maybe you'll get sick of being the monster.
Michael knew he could open his eyes now because they would still be across the street, thinking he was ran over and killed. Little did they know this accident had been planned for months by a friend of his who was a stunt driver. The reason he faked his own death was because he owed a lot of money to the wrong people, and he had planned on telling his friends he was alive when it was safe to do so. They worried if his body wasn't picked up yet by a fake ambulance. That was a part of the plan. Then a real ambulance will arrive. But Michael didn't have to worry, because a sign pole that was hit outside the shop by the truck, saying fresh ice cream on sale here, fell and hit him on the head, and he was killed instantly.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, maybe you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed. Think you're something out of my nightmares. See me right there. But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, then will you get bored of killing me?
Silhouettes of you are like a taunt.
Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content.